What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto had to spend 7 nights with 7 different women to seal away a demon? If you enjoy this video then please like, share and do comment. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. So let us start the story.
After the whole Mizuki incident. Nay, Gigi, am I really the Kyuubi? Naruto asked the Hokage as they sat in his office after the whole Mizuki disaster. No, Naruto, the Hokage said firmly. I promise you, no. But how do you know for sure? Naruto pressed. All of the villagers scowl at me and call me monster and demon. So how do you know? Maybe Yondaime messed up and I really am the fox. Sandame mused. Well, let me show you something. He reached into a drawer and pulled out 2 items. What is this? He asked, holding one of them up. A kunai, Naruto answered. And this? A scroll? Naruto was confused. Right, now watch. Naruto watched carefully as the Hokage wrote some characters onto the scroll, then set the kunai on top of the characters and activated it with a flash of chakra. The kunai disappeared in a puff of smoke. Do you know what I did? The Hokage asked. Naruto shook his head. I used Fuuin jutsu to seal the kunai into the scroll. Now what is this? He held up the finished product. A scroll with a kunai sealed into it? Correct, as far as it goes, the Hokage allowed. But is this a scroll or a kunai? A scroll. Exactly, the Hokage said, pleased. Now do you understand? It took Naruto a few moments to grasp what Sandame was getting at, and then the lights went on. Ooh, he said, understanding. So I'm not the Kyuubi then. Sandame shook his head in agreement. The Kyuubi is just imprisoned inside me. And held there by a seal, he said. Sandame nodded, and Naruto began to think. A seal had managed to defeat and imprison the Kyuubi no Kitsune, the strongest demon to ever exist. It was just ink on paper, or a stomach, as the case may be, and it held so much power. Yeah, Naruto decided, I gotta get me some of that. By the time the Sandame turned back from putting the scroll away, Naruto was gone. The Konoha Shinobi Library was open 24 hours, so even though it was late when he'd left the Hokage Tower, Naruto headed straight there. Luckily, it was also late enough that Naruto didn't run into anyone else there. Even as unfamiliar as he was with the library, it didn't take him long to find what he was looking for. After all, everyone else might have thought he was a dead-last moron, but the truth was that class was boring and Naruto had never cared about stupid things like grades. But this interested him, so he grabbed half a dozen dusty books that were on the meager old shelf dedicated to Fuinjutsu and took them back to his apartment and began to read. All of the new academy graduates had been given a week off. This allowed them to get their ninja registrations from the administration office, but more importantly, it let the academy instructors make their team assignment recommendations to the Hokage and gave the Hokage the time to approve or change them as necessary and assign a Junin sensei to each. Naruto had spent the entire week trying to figure out Fuinjutsu. He hadn't seen any of his classmates and none of them had found out yet about his special graduation. So when Naruto showed up at the academy the next week, there was a bit of surprise. Naruto, didn't you know this meeting was for graduates only? Shikamaru asked, wondering what he was doing there. Naruto just pointed to his forehead protector in answer, too intent on his book to give a verbal reply. He slipped into an empty seat in the back without further questions, though that certainly didn't mean nobody else was curious. On the contrary, interest was piqued. Uzumaki Naruto had somehow passed, even though he'd failed the exam. And he was reading a book. In public. Voluntarily. A few of them checked to see if the sky was falling, but the entrance of Sakura and Ino drew their attention away from Naruto and to the spectacle that they created by arguing over who would sit by Sasuke. For his part, Sasuke refused to even look at them, staring straight ahead and sneering in derision. Their contest over who would have the privilege of sitting next to Sasuke was so intense, they began to wrestle on the floor. Unfortunately for them, that was the exact moment Iruka walked in. Sakura, Ino, what are you doing? He demanded. Sakura stammered, unsure of what to do. Just some last-minute practicing, sensei. Ino said innocently, well used to trying to get out of trouble. Right sensei. Sakura agreed, quickly following her lead. Well, that's enough. Why don't you both sit up here in the front where I can make sure you don't have any more last-minute practices, Iruka said. The girls slumped, but did as he said. Iruka gave a short speech to the class on how they were proud ninja of Konoha now, and needed to act in ways which would not bring dishonor to the shinobi corps. He looked particularly at Sakura and Ino as he said that. Then he announced the teams. Naruto was peripherally aware of what Iruka was saying, enough to note that he'd been put with Sakura and Sasuke on Team 7, but he was busy with his book. So it didn't bother him when everyone left for lunch, or when everyone came back to meet their Junin sensei, or when he, Sakura, and Sasuke were left by their sensei to wait for more than 2 hours. When their sensei finally did come, Naruto looked at him and felt a brief flutter of recognition before it flitted away. The silver-haired Junin gave them all a once-over. My first impression of you is, you're not worth my time. After Kakashi, Sakura, and Sasuke all left, Naruto sat on the academy's roof, wondering about Kakashi and what he'd said. They were to go on a survival test, but weren't to eat beforehand. And there was a 66% failure rate. Naruto, having flunked the academy final exam 3 times, was well aware that there were a large number of students who passed the final exam but were still at the academy for another year. He just hadn't realized that they'd been sent back by their Junin sensei. And Naruto could not afford to be sent back to the academy. He'd only passed by the skin of his teeth this time. If he were to be sent back, he'd be put with a new teacher. And without Iruka, he doubted he'd be given a chance. So he needed to find more information about Kakashi's survival test. Luckily, he was already at the academy. By himself. Grinning, he thought of all the pranks he could play, but then he remembered the hite 8 on his forehead and quickly sobered. He was a ninja now, and that meant no more pranks. Not that he wouldn't still make good use of his pranking skills. Naruto had been called into the administrative office of the academy so often that he knew not only where it was, but that students' personnel records were kept in the filing cabinet on the wall to the left of the door and were organized by year and class. He also knew that the only thing between him and those records were a few flimsy locks. After all, in a school full of children, they couldn't have lethal traps set up. And, courtesy of his neighborhood, Naruto could pick a lock as quickly and easily as a professional thief. It took him 30 seconds to get off the roof and through the office door, and only a handful of breaths to unlock the filing cabinet. He carefully began flipping through the records. First year, second, third, fourth? Bingo, review year. He shuffled through the students until he found the 3 who had been assigned to Kakashi last year. One hated him with a passion, and the other 2 had dropped out. But one of those, Kensuke, he knew fairly well, being from the same neighborhood. Considering, Naruto thought he might be able to get him to help. He carefully put everything back precisely where he'd found it and locked the cabinet and office doors behind him. Then he went to find Kensuke. He found him in the southwest corner of Konohazakasen, the red light district, running a shell game. He waited, carefully hidden, until Kensuke's marks had given up, then showed himself. "Hey, Naruto," Kensuke greeted him. "How's it hanging?" "Meh, a little to the left these days," Naruto shrugged. "I got this a few days ago, you know, and was hoping you could shed some light on a few things for me." Naruto pointed to his hite 8. Kensuke raised an eyebrow behind his glasses and pushed his dark hair behind his ear. "Is that so?" he said. "Well, play me. Win and I'll answer your questions. Lose and you owe me a favor. Fair?" Naruto nodded and watched Kensuke flip up the shells to prove to him there was no trick and to show him where the Queen of Spades was. Then he started spinning them, trying to confuse Naruto into forgetting which shell held the queen. "You've gotten better at this," Naruto remarked, without taking his eyes off the table. "I've had a lot of practice since dropping out. Now tell me, where's my lady?" he asked as he stopped shuffling the shells. Naruto slapped his hands down on top of the 2 empty shells, more out of habit than to ensure that Kensuke didn't try to pull a fast one. Kensuke sighed and lifted the remaining shell to show that it did indeed hold the queen. "TCH, I should have known better than to bet against you," Kensuke complained. "What do you want to know?" "I've been assigned to Hitaki Kakashi." The next morning, armed with Kensuke's information, Naruto ate a large breakfast. He debated showing up late, but decided he may as well be on time. Just in case Kakashi decided to show up. And he brought his latest Fuuin jutsu book with him so he wouldn't waste the hours he expected to wait. He was the last to show up, being the only one not to have rushed to be there early. "Hey, guys," he greeted. Sasuke grunted and Sakura waved. Then Naruto sat to wait, Timing, after all, was everything. After 2 hours of silence, he heard Sakura's stomach rumble. Another 10 minutes and Sasuke's replied. There, Naruto thought as he pulled out a big bag of dumplings and began to munch. Kakashi-sensei ordered us not to eat this morning, Sakura said accusingly. Nope, Naruto replied casually, listening to both of their stomachs complain loudly as he munched down another one. He made a recommendation that we not eat before we came because he thought we would throw up. He also said we would be taking a survival test, and I remember the last survival test we took at the academy had us hunting and scavenging for food for 3 days. So you better believe I ate this morning. Are you saying you guys didn't? Sakura blinked at that. Naruto had managed to outthink her. Naruto, the dead last, had analyzed the situation better than she and Sasuke, the top two in the class. She wasn't sure what to do about that. Sasuke just scowled. Hun, Naruto said, scratching his chin as though in contemplation. Well, I'll share my dumplings with you. Whatever Kakashi has in mind, it'll be better if we're not starving when we go into it. So here. He held out the dumplings. When Sasuke reached out for one, he grinned. Gotcha. So Kakashi found them companionably snacking on dumplings when he showed up half an hour later. He was so startled by their blatant disregard for his warnings that, for a moment, he just stood there and stared. Ohio, Naruto said with a smile. Sasuke gave him a raised eyebrow, and Sakura frowned at him, accusingly saying, You're late. Ma, a black cat crossed my path and I had to go the other way around the village to get here, he explained. All three of his potential students glowered at him. Kakashi smiled. He thought he was beginning to like these twerps. They were all three hidden away. The companionship forged that morning just from sharing a snack already coming into play. Without any conscious thought, they had all three fled into hiding from Kakashi together. So, only two of us can pass, Sakura said sadly. She'd gotten to like Naruto, just a little bit, that morning. When he wasn't running around like a loud fool or bugging her for dates, he really wasn't all that bad. No, this is an all-or-nothing test, Naruto said with a certainty that surprised the others. They looked at him in confusion. I am not going back to the academy for a review year, Naruto said. So I did some research on this Hitaki guy. And I got some information about this belt test of his. It's all an effing mind trip. Hun? What do you mean? Sasuke demanded. Genin teams are passed and failed whole, Naruto explained. That's why they're so careful picking them. So Kakashi only having 2 bells is a trick to drive us apart. Sasuke's eyes narrowed in anger, and Sakura let out a soft, oh, of realization. It only took them a moment of thought to realize that Naruto was right. They'd seen dejected Genin return to the academy for review year, too. And nobody had ever complained about their teammates going on without them. Though some had certainly complained that it was their teammates who were to blame for the review year. Naruto, Sasuke said, furious that his new supposed teacher had tried to play him for a fool. What else do you know? A lot, Naruto said with a wicked smile. And I have a plan. Kakashi was surprised when it was Sasuke instead of Naruto who was the first to engage him. From all of their files, he'd expected Naruto to be the most impulsive. As Kakashi was slowly herding Sasuke where he wanted him, he saw Sakura and Naruto hiding in the wings, waiting. He had to suppress a smile, wondering if this would be the first team to work together. Then Sasuke completely and suddenly changed tactics, switched a left jab to his torso to a grappling move. Now, Sasuke yelled as Kakashi tried to dislodge him, only to find that he was unable to move. Naruto and Sakura had sprung from the bush at Sasuke's cue, and Naruto, he saw, was concentrating very hard on something. He couldn't tell what, but he assumed it had something to do with his, and apparently Sasuke's, too, immobility. Go, Sakura, Naruto grunted, hands maintaining their seal and remaining as still as possible. Sakura darted towards them and grabbed the bells, then ran back to Naruto. Sasuke, ready, Naruto warned. And suddenly, Kakashi could move again, but Sasuke had dropped and rolled away towards his teammates. A slip of paper fluttered to the ground, dropped when Sasuke had moved. Kakashi bent to pick it up and saw a seal painted on it. This, he realized, was how they had been frozen. He wondered where they had gotten it, and how Naruto had learned to activate it. Then he looked at it closer, and wondered what exactly it was. He'd never seen a seal quite like that before. Well, Sakura, he said, tucking the paper into his pouch for further examination later. Which of the boys are you giving your second bell to? But we worked together, sensei, she said, obviously confused. Don't we all pass? I told you that whoever had a bell would eat lunch, and whoever didn't would get tied to a post and sent back to the academy. So, since you have both, you get to pick which of the boys passes, and which gets sent back. Kakashi paused and rubbed his chin. Unless, of course, you're going to keep both bells for yourself and send both of them back. That isn't fair, she protested. It took all three of us working together to get the bells. Life isn't fair, Kakashi said easily. Give it to Sasuke, Naruto said, watching Kakashi with flat eyes. He's bluffing. He'll pass all of us or none of us. I assure you I do not bluff. Then give it to Naruto, Sasuke said. It's about time the Uchiha seat on the council worked for something other than collecting dust. It would be interesting to see their reaction to the number of genin Kakashi has failed, Naruto remarked. I believe the total so far is 21? 12 of whom passed their subsequent exam. And at least 8 of them had relatives on the council. Kakashi wondered how Naruto knew that, and whether or not the boys were serious. Although he had to give them points, trying to threaten their Junin sensei into passing them took some serious chutzpah. Meh, he said, the worst that could happen to me is that I wouldn't be given a team. And since I'm trying to fail you anyway, that is my end goal. You, of course, would all still fail. Kakashi sensei, Sakura hemmed. Then she gave a bell to both the boys, much to their surprise. I did the least. If anyone deserves to go back, it's me. Kakashi smiled, pleased he finally had a team that he could pass. A team that deserved to pass. Good choice, Sakura, he said. But, you all pass. He saw the other 2 kids give Naruto a grateful look and an appraising one. How did you know, Naruto? Sakura asked. He sure didn't sound like he was bluffing. Ma, Naruto rubbed the back of his head. You should never try to con a conman. You? Sasuke asked skeptically. Naruto shrugged and smiled slyly. I may run a game or 2 in my time, he said. Really? Sakura asked. What do you mean? Kakashi shook his head, pleased his team was already bonding. Well, a good con never reveals his tricks, you know, Naruto hedged with a grin. What? Naruto. Sakura began to yell. Forget about me? Kakashi asked. It was all of your choices to give up the bell for your teammates that made me pass you. There's something important I want you to remember. For shinobi, rules are important. They govern almost all of our existence. But to think, as you did this morning when you ignored my words telling you not to eat, is more important. And most important of all are these bonds we forge with our comrades. So one day, when you are presented with the choice between following the rules or saving your comrade, I want you to remember this moment, when you, 3 genin, worked together and broke the rules and sacrificed yourself to defeat a Junin and help each other succeed. They remained silent as they took in his words. Congratulations, Kakashi said. Now, we're officially Team 7. We'll meet at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning at that bridge. All of the Junin currently in Konoha were waiting at the Triple Kunai, a shinobi-only bar near the Hokage Tower that Konoha's Junin frequented. As Kakashi headed towards the back where they had formed a large table, he saw he was the last of those given a genin team to arrive. Well? Asuma asked immediately. Kakashi shrugged and everyone groaned. Not another team failed, Guy moaned. My eternal rival, why must you douse the flames of? They passed, he interrupted. Everyone froze. What was that? Asuma asked. Can you repeat that? Hayate said, coughing. I'm sure I must not have heard that correctly. Did you actually say you passed a team? Anko tried to use the distraction to slither her way into Kakashi's lap, but he stood at the last second to get around and she only managed to take his seat. We knew it had to happen sometime, Anko grouched. Hokage-sama must have made him. Nope, Kakashi said cheerily as he returned. They're just an exceptional bunch. Now which of you passed your brats? Mine were practically born together, Asuma said. They passed my test easily. Shikamaru can throw a plan together pretty easily, and they were able to catch me no problem. I let Ino and Choji maneuver me into position for Shikamaru to catch me with his family's shadow jutsu. This was my first team, Kurenai spoke up. But they worked together well. I had them try to find me, and it took them a few hours but they did it. A few other Junin mentioned failing their teams. Mine failed, too. Idiots, all of them. Now spill it, Hitaki, Genma demanded. I want to hear about this team that passed your infamous bell test. Well, when I got there, they were all sitting together eating dumplings like I hadn't ever told them not to eat, he said, still confused over this. The others began to chuckle. It seems as though you, my eternal rival, have been gifted with a team which will test your flames of youth, Guy said, slapping his back. More like he got stuck with brats as hard-headed and ornery as he is, Asuma chuckled. Kakashi quickly summed up the rest of the test, then got out the paper with the seal. Have any of you ever seen a seal like this? He asked. Anko, Asuma, and Guy, all having some minor experience with seals, looked the paper over. Anko poked at it a few times, then tried to activate it and the paper dissolved. Well, shit, she said. Kakashi watched as the disintegrated paper blew away, and wondered what was to come for his team. When the genin of Team 7 showed up the next morning, they were again forced into a long wait. I have a sneaking suspicion this is going to be a habit of his, Naruto said, much annoyed as he leaned against one of the bridge's railings. Sasuke grunted, equally annoyed. Sakura sighed. Well, I brought dango to share, she said hesitantly. If you'd like. Really? Naruto asked, thrilled someone was going to share food with him. Sakura agreed happily. It was only fair, since you shared your dumplings with us yesterday. Thanks, Sakura, he said, helping himself to a stick from the bag she set out. He conveniently forgot to mention that he'd only brought the dumplings as a reason to share his knowledge of the test. Sasuke jumped down from his perch on the railing and joined them. If this happens again tomorrow, Sasuke said, we should start planning something to do. I refuse to waste hours every day waiting on that man, even if he is our sensei. So when Kakashi finally did show up, he was again met with 3 genin, munching on snacks and, it appeared, plotting. He wondered who had caught their ire. Ohio, Mina-san, he greeted. You're late, Sakura censured him. Well? Is this something we can expect from you often? Sasuke interrupted his excuse. Because we have other things we can be doing besides waiting for you, you know, Naruto finished. Kakashi blinked in surprise, taking in the 3 of them, arms all crossed over their chests and glaring at him. Even the Hokage didn't confront him on his lateness, at least, not directly, and these genin thought to do so on their second day as his students? Still, he found them kind of cute, and was glad his mask hid his grin. Ma, let's do some training, nay? He distracted them. He set them all to doing katas for the basic taijutsu style taught at the academy, and frowned as he watched Naruto. Hold, he ordered, and Naruto froze, that having been drilled into all of them at the academy. Kakashi poked him, and Naruto fell over. Your left foot should be another step forward and turned out more in that stance. Again. To his credit, Naruto got right back up. Shoulders back for this one. He made small but important adjustments to Naruto's stances throughout. Didn't you listen to your teachers at all? Kakashi finally asked. This is exactly how Mizuki. Naruto's mouth snapped shut at that. I remember that, Sakura piped up. Mizuki-sensei spent a whole week with you working on your taijutsu. Mizuki hated me, Naruto said. Voice so nonchalant about it even Sasuke turned to look. I'm not surprised he taught me wrong. Kakashi filed that away for further analysis later, and had Naruto run through the kata a few more times before he was satisfied. Then they moved on to the next. It took the whole morning, but Kakashi slowly adjusted Naruto's stances and movements for all of the basic academy katas. Then he had them break for lunch. Sakura almost asked Sasuke to lunch on a date, but then she hesitated. He'd actually spoken to her the past 2 days, and she hadn't even had to beg him to do it. And Naruto, he seemed to be able to instigate it. And he wasn't as bad as she'd thought he was. So maybe, she decided, it would be best to focus on being a team just now. She nodded. Love could always come later, after all. Hey, do you two want to grab lunch? She asked. Yeah, Naruto happily agreed. He saw Sasuke hesitating. And, we can finish up from this morning, you know. Sasuke perked up at this sweetening of the pot and nodded. Come on, Naruto said. I know the best ramen stand in Konoha. When Kakashi showed up after their lunch break, it was closer to 3 o'clock than the 1 o'clock he'd told them. And he was very pleased to see Sasuke and Sakura helping Naruto with his forms. Sasuke by pushing him off balance when his stance was flawed, and Sakura by making adjustments to his stance, helping the blonde find his balance in the stances. He let them work for another few minutes before announcing his presence. "Good job, Mina-san," he said. "You're late." All three of them grouched, ignoring him and continuing to work. So cold to your sensei? Well, I guess none of you want a mission then?" he teased, pulling out his book. All three of them were in front of him, peering at him eagerly before he could even open Icha. "Let's go," Naruto said. Kakashi suppressed a grin. He thought with satisfaction. Age and cunning will triumph over youth and enthusiasm every time. And so it went for the next few weeks. In the mornings, Kakashi would work with them on improving some aspect of their shinobi training, and in the afternoons, they would get a mission. And when Kakashi was late, which was always, they would help each other train themselves. Mornings were dedicated to Naruto, and they would go over the basics, reviewing academy taijutsu and skills that he'd either missed completely or been taught wrong. Sakura and Sasuke were curious about why Naruto's education had been so sabotaged, but whenever they brought it up, Naruto would just wave them off with a smile and a laugh. The time spent waiting for Kakashi after lunch, Naruto returned the favor. He would barrage Sasuke with shadow clones, helping him try to activate his Sharingan. And he would let Sakura use them for targets, helping her learn to hit harder and gain more stamina, because her current hits wouldn't even dispel his clones, much less hurt a real ninja. Until one day, Sasuke was tired and aggravated by his lack of progress. "None of this shit is working," Sasuke snarled as he gave a vicious kick that dispelled the last of Naruto's clones. "Why the hell can't I get my eyes to activate? He was able to when he was years younger than me. What am I doing wrong?" Naruto scratched the back of his head in dismay. This emotional shit wasn't something he was any good at dealing with. Maybe you just need more clones?" Naruto suggested. "That won't do anything," Sasuke said, disheartened. "I know that one solid strike and they're gone, so I never even feel concerned, no matter how many you summon." "So, you need stronger clones? More dangerous ones?" Naruto asked, considering the possibility. "Maybe clones that last a while past a strike? Is that even possible?" Sakura asked curiously. "Do you know how to modify a jutsu like that?" Iruka-sensei said it was dangerous. "Well, I guess we'll find out," Naruto said, biting his bottom lip. The next hour was spent with Naruto making hundreds of shadow clones in dozens of different ways. More chakra, less chakra, unbalanced chakra skewed to spiritual or physical energy, purely using physical or spiritual energy, everything and anything he could think of. On a whim, Naruto tried molding a clone out of dirt instead of pure chakra, but found them not only more difficult to make but weaker and without the ability to use chakra at all. Still, he ran through a few other mediums, water, air, leaves, smoke, fire, to see whether any of those were any better. They weren't. "Let's take a break," Sakura suggested, out of breath from helping dispel the clones to test whether they were any stronger. Sasuke frowned but sat with them, opening the container of onigiri he'd brought. Naruto grinned greedily as he took one and bit into viciously. He loved onigiri and only ever got them when Sasuke brought it for seconds, as they'd taken to calling their extra breakfasts. The little treat hidden inside the ball of rice was always so good. He paged through his latest book on seals, more out of habit than anything else, as he was too caught up in trying to figure out how to make his clones stronger to help Sasuke to really pay too much attention to the book. A piece of pickled plum fell out when he took a bite of the onigiri, falling on the book. "Ah, shit," Naruto grumbled, wiping it up. Then his eyes stuck on the page where the stain was, right on an entry on durability seals. His mind began to race, whirling to 1,000 places all at once. He looked between the onigiri and the page and back again. This, he thought, could work. A seal inside a cage bunchen. Just like an onigiri. He quickly read through the section on durability seals, then scribbled one on a spare slip of paper. Now he had Sasuke and Sakura's attention. The last time they'd seen him make a seal, they'd managed to take down an elite Junin, after all. The trick, he thought, would be activating the seal at the same time he created the shadow clone. He wasn't worried about sticking the seal inside, he'd already made clones out of leaves, so he knew he had that part down. The first try didn't work. The seal was well inside the clone, but not active. Ditto tries 2 to 12. Try 13 got an active seal, but once activated, he couldn't integrate it with the shadow clone. He frowned in frustration and wrote out another seal, changing the activation component around. Again and again and again. Then the limiters, then the seal itself. He scowled as none of it worked, then scowled more when he realized Kakashi was coming soon, which meant he would have to put his experiments on hold for a while. The three of them had an unspoken agreement to keep their training to themselves. After all, if Kakashi wasn't going to bother to care enough to show up on time, why should they bother to let him know what went on while he wasn't there? But his brow was furrowed in thought all throughout the morning as the idea continued to percolate. Am I really so boring, Naruto? Kakashi asked drolly, noticing his lack of attention during their training. Yes, came three answers all at once. Kakashi raised his eyebrow. Oh, really? He asked. Well, maybe you'd find 50 laps around the lake more amusing. What? Naruto yelled, finally coming out of his fog. You shouldn't blame us for answering your question. Sakura protested. Kakashi just motioned them on, and the three of them slumped over and headed off. Sadist, Sasuke muttered. 3 days later, Naruto still had made no progress. But he'd learned a lot about seals from his failures. Sasuke was ready to throw in the towel. When the clones started to explode, Sakura heartily agreed. Naruto, give it up, Sasuke told him with a sigh. This should work, though, Naruto protested. I don't understand what's going on with this. Even if you do get it, there's no guarantee it'll work though, right? Sakura asked. I mean, that it'll help Sasuke? Sasuke turned away to glare at a tree. He said he needed more dangerous opponents. If he can't dispel them so easily, the clones will be more dangerous opponents, Naruto said. It'll work. Or, at least it won't hurt. I just need to figure out how to get it to all stay together. Sasuke and Sakura tried to convince him, then gave up and left him to it. Naruto stayed at the training ground all night, determined to find a way to help Sasuke. He would show everyone he wasn't some dead last loser, that he could help them as much as they helped him. Then his latest attempt exploded even more violently than normal, cutting his hand where he held it up to shield his face. Damn it, Naruto yelled, slamming his hand to the ground where he'd fallen. A seal stuck to his hand as the blood made it sticky. He glared at it. Fine, he said, but you're the last one. He tossed it forward and formed the chakra to create a clone, reaching at the same time with his chakra to activate the seal. Yo, the clone said as the smoke disappeared. No, explosion? Naruto stared, shocked. Alright, you know the drill. The clone nodded, and Naruto threw a hard punch to its face and waited for it to disappear. And waited. Holy shit, it worked, he yelled. Let's try another. And he slugged the clone again and again and again before it finally disappeared. Now completely revved up, Naruto went to work. His team found him passed out at the training ground the next morning and sighed in exasperation. What an idiot, Sasuke rolled his eyes. I think it's kind of sweet, Sasuke-kun, Sakura ventured an opinion. I mean, he's doing it to help you, after all. TCH. Sasuke didn't have any other response. Mostly because he was kind of confused by the fact that Naruto was working so hard to help him. Nobody had ever done that before, not his father or his brother or any of the other sycophants who'd come out of the woodwork after his clan's murder. No matter how much they'd protested, they were trying to help him. Erg, Naruto moaned, rolling over and rubbing his face. What time's it? Time to get your lazy ass up, Dobi, Sasuke said, prodding his shoulder with a toe. Sasuke. Naruto jumped up, realizing they were here. Sakura, I did it. They both blinked in surprise. No, really, Naruto said. Watch. He pulled out one of the seals he'd already made. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Naruto called, activating the seal at the same time. The clone waved. Go on, Naruto urged. Hit it. Sasuke shrugged and gave it a casual kick. Their eyes widened in surprise when it didn't disappear. Geez, put a little more effort into it than that. The clone rolled his eyes. Really, Naruto agreed. I want to put him through his paces. Sasuke turned to him. Can you make more? Naruto grinned and threw out a few dozen seals, and soon the clearing was filled with Kage Bunshin. When Kakashi arrived a few hours later, he raised his eyebrow at finding all three of his students wiped out and panting on the grass. Ohio, Mina-san, he said cheerfully. They only groaned. What, are my cute little students not happy to see me? Well, maybe a few hundred laps around the lake will change your mind. The string of words that came out of Naruto's mouth was almost enough to make Kakashi blush. Sasuke and Sakura turned tomato red. I'm not sure that's anatomically possible, Kakashi said consideringly. Naruto's response to that did make Kakashi blush. Where in the world did you learn such things? Kakashi asked, jaw slack. TCH, in a whorehouse, where else? Naruto said. They all rolled their eyes, sure he was joking. Well, I guess I'll just have to beat it out of you, then, Kakashi said. We can't have a proud shinobi of the leaf sprouting such obscenities, can we? His students looked at him incredulously. Sensei, you read porn, Sakura said. In public, while teaching us. Yes, well, when you get to be my age, things are a little different. Now get ready, Kakashi ordered, watching as Naruto tensed and readied himself to run or dodge. Go! Naruto disappeared, but Kakashi was already moving. The three genin groaned as they collapsed together in a heap. Sensei, that was brutal, Naruto complained of the training. The other two could only grunt in agreement. Suck it up, Kakashi said with no sympathy, looking as cool and unruffled as ever. They glared at him as he sat there, calmly reading his book without the decency to be even sweating. Water, Sakura begged, shaking her empty canteen. Naruto flexed a bit of chakra and a clone popped into existence, gathering their canteens and heading towards the stream to fill them. That, Sakura said in appreciation, is such a useful jutsu. I can teach you if you want, Naruto offered. Sakura and Sasuke both perked up at that. Absolutely not, Kakashi said sternly, crisply shutting his book. All three genin looked at him in surprise. But sensei. No, Kakashi repeated. The fact of the matter is, Kage Bunshin is a kinjutsu, one that Naruto shouldn't even know, much less be teaching to other genin. But that aside, how the jutsu works is to divide your chakra evenly among the clones you make. That Naruto is able to use it so easily and so casually is a special case. Even I don't use it so carelessly, even the Hokage doesn't. If he were to teach you too, and you were to attempt it, I think the chakra drain would probably kill you at this point. Kakashi met each of his genin in the eye, wanting to make sure he'd driven his point home. I want your word that you won't attempt this, Kakashi said. They all nodded their agreement. But, sensei, why's Naruto such a special case? Sakura asked. Yeah, why can he do it so easily if even the Hokage can't? Sasuke asked. Naruto was looking down and away, not wanting to be a part of where this conversation was going. Well, Kakashi said, rubbing his cloth-covered chin and contemplating what to tell them. I guess it's similar to you being able to develop the Sharingan, Sasuke. Naruto's eyes went wide at what he was implying. Bloodline, Sasuke murmured in understanding. Sakura's mouth made a little "oh" as she nodded quickly, it all making sense to her now. No wonder Naruto knows that jutsu then, she said. That explains why he's so good at clones. As Kakashi nodded, Naruto looked away, guilt spearing up at the thought of deceiving his friends. But there was nothing for it. The Kyuubi was an S-class secret of the village, and the Hokage had emphasized how important it was to keep silent. He promised himself he would make it up to them. When Naruto went home that night, he was still thinking about it. And about how he couldn't teach them Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. And about how much more they'd be able to train if only they could use Kage Bunshins. He wondered if there was a way he could do the jutsu for them, which would keep his promise not to teach his teammates but still give them all the benefits of it. And he decided that, if there wasn't a way, he'd make one. The next 2 weeks saw Naruto rarely without his nose buried in either a book on seals or jutsu theory. And even when he was doing something else, he always had a clone picking up where he'd left off. Sasuke wasn't sure what to think about his sudden studiousness. Of course, Sasuke wasn't sure what to think about Naruto at all most of the time, so he figured this probably wasn't any different. So he just watched as Naruto worked frantically on perfecting his onigiri bunshins, as he'd taken to calling them for reasons Sasuke had yet to understand, until one morning Naruto announced they were done. What do you mean you're done? Sakura asked. It can take years to completely finish and understand the alteration of a jutsu. Meh? Naruto scratched the back of his head and attempted to look stupid. Sasuke was sure it wasn't difficult for the blonde, but he hated it when Naruto pretended to be dumber than he was, and when it came to seals, Sasuke freely admitted Naruto was something of a genius. Cut it out, Sasuke muttered angrily. Naruto cocked his head to the side curiously at Sasuke's remark, then shrugged and dropped the idiot act. Well, I've explored all the possible alterations to the durability seal, Naruto said, launching into his techno-babble. Sasuke attempted to tune him out as Naruto started discussing limiters and activation components and other things that gave Sasuke a headache. So now, it should take a killing stroke to pop the clones, Naruto finished. Sasuke saw Sakura drooling. He figured she had tried to follow him instead of zoning out and just pretending to. Right, she finally agreed. Good, Naruto said happily. So, ready? Sasuke nodded and Naruto threw a dozen seal-wrapped kunai towards him, activating the jutsu. He immediately noticed how much harder they were to dispel. No matter how hard he hit or how well he connected, they wouldn't pop. Sasuke grinned and began fighting in earnest. He remembered what Naruto had said about a killing strike, and then it happened. The kunai in Sasuke's hand plunged into one of the clone's heart. Sasuke froze as the clone reached its hands up to its chest. He yanked the kunai out and stared in horror as blood poured out of the clone's chest. I've killed Naruto, he thought in shock. I've killed Naruto. He didn't realize he was also muttering it aloud. Then the clone disappeared in a cloud of smoke, leaving behind only the kunai Naruto had used to make it. Sasuke dropped to his knees, kunai falling to the ground, grief and pain and terror all wrapping around in his mind as the sight of his hand going into Naruto's chest overlapped with memories of Itachi's systematic slaughter of the clan. Then all he knew was blinding agony, and he began screaming, hands pressed to his eyes. He didn't know how long he stayed like that, and had no idea when Naruto and Sakura had started to hold him, but suddenly he wanted nothing more than to flee. After a brief struggle he managed to break away from them long enough to rush a few feet, where he was stopped as he became violently ill. Still, Naruto and Sakura went to him, Sakura holding his hair as Naruto steadied him to make sure he wouldn't fall. Leave, alone? Sasuke tried to mutter as he attempted to collect himself. Embarrassment and grief and stress and pain too much for him to deal with when he knew they were still watching. Not on your life, Sasuke, Naruto responded quietly. Sakura didn't reply at all, except to pour some water from her canteen on a spare kerchief she had in her pouch and then press it to Sasuke's forehead. Naruto wasn't sure what to think about Sasuke. He wasn't screaming and vomiting anymore, but he was quiet, absolutely silent instead of his normal introverted bastard silence. And he held himself with a stiffness that bordered on brittle. And Naruto didn't want him to break again. So, I think I should henge the clones we use for spars from now on, nay? Naruto suggested. Then Kakashi showed up and Naruto refrained from swearing. As always, their sensei had a shitty sense of timing. Ohio, Mina-san, Kakashi said cheerily, then looked at his team and cocked his head to the side when he saw how subdued they all were. He briefly debated asking why, then decided not to get in the middle of any lover's spat they might be having and stay out of it. So you may be wondering why I have 3 rabbits with me today, Kakashi said, moving on. I've decided it's time for you to begin to learn how to deal with some of the more brutal aspects of ninja life. Your first task this morning is to kill a rabbit. Naruto and Sakura stared at him, mouths agape. Naruto had to refrain from swearing aloud that Kakashi would choose this morning of all mornings for such a thing. Kakashi, he decided, had really shitty timing. Here you go, Kakashi said, tossing each of them a rabbit and a kunai. I know this may be difficult, but... He trailed off as he saw Naruto and Sakura weren't paying any attention to him at all, their entire focus on Sasuke. Then Sasuke drove the kunai deeply into his rabbit's skull, killing it instantly. The impaled rabbit was dropped to the ground, not thrown, just released as though he couldn't be bothered to hold it anymore. Then Sasuke turned and walked away, head and shoulders hunched. Naruto and Sakura turned to follow him, but Kakashi had a grip on both of their necks. Let him deal with this his way, Kakashi said. You'll have to learn how to deal with it in your own ways as well. Fuck that, I'm not letting you leave until you complete your assignment, Kakashi said sternly. Sakura and Naruto exchanged glances, then killed their rabbits in 2 clean strikes before tossing them at Kakashi's feet. We're taking the rest of the day off, Naruto said, voice even and steady and serious in a way that Kakashi had never heard from him before. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Then Kakashi watched confused as Sakura and Naruto went after Sasuke. He considered trying to find out what had his team in such a strange mood, but decided to let them work it out amongst themselves. The hands-off approach was probably for the best. Weeks later he would come to regret that decision. It hadn't taken long for Naruto and Sakura to catch up with Sasuke. He wasn't running or trying to conceal himself or even really paying much attention to anything other than putting one foot in front of the other. So it didn't take much for Naruto to subtly guide their steps away from the village proper and up the path that led to the top of the Hokage monument. He gently pushed Sasuke to sit, and he complied without any resistance. Naruto worried that maybe Sasuke wasn't even there at all. After just sitting there next to him for a while, Sasuke suddenly slammed his fists into the rock beside his legs. "Why the fuck am I so pathetic?" he demanded, yelling out his anger. "I kill a clone, which isn't even really alive, and I flip out. Hell, I practically have a nervous breakdown. If I can't even handle that, how can I ever kill that man? How will I ever avenge my clan and give them peace? How? I don't have the answers, Sasuke," Sakura offered tentatively. "But I know that you are not pathetic, not in any way at all. And I know that if this is something you set your mind on, even if you don't know how you'll do it now, someday you'll be able to achieve your goal. And however you do it, you know we'll be with you," Naruto said. "Whatever you do, we'll be there." "You can't," Sasuke yelled. "He killed my clan. He killed everyone and I'm all that's left, and I had to kill him." "Can you tell us who?" Sakura asked gently. "Him," Sasuke said. "That man. My brother." And he told them the story he'd never before spoken. When he was done, the three of them sat in silence, digesting it all. "It doesn't matter," Naruto finally said, voice soft but strong and steady, "if Itachi is as strong as the Hokage. I'll still be with you." "You don't understand," Sasuke shot back bitterly. "I had to do it. Me. He's my brother, and it's my clan." "Well, yes. But does that mean that you had to do it alone?" Naruto asked, contemplating the whole thing and cursing himself that he wasn't better at dealing with such delicate situations. "I guess the real question is it more important for you to get your vengeance for your family quickly or by yourself?" Sasuke blinked, startled into thinking instead of reacting. "Because remember how the three of us beat Kakashi-sensei straight out of the academy?" Naruto continued, not waiting for Sasuke to respond. "And Kakashi-sensei is one of the elite. Working together, the three of us can probably take him within a year, maybe 2. If you want to do it on your own, sure you'll be able to do it eventually, but that eventually could be a long ways off." Sasuke was too taken aback by what Naruto had said and the ideas it put into his mind and the feelings it made swirl around inside him to respond. The casual assuredness in his voice when he'd mentioned Sasuke being able to do it. Sasuke wasn't sure he'd ever had anyone believe in him like that. The belief staggered him into silence, and so Naruto just shrugged and kept going. "Either way, Sasuke, you have to know we'll do everything we can to help you be ready for him," Naruto said. "If that's going with you when you go after the bastard or if it's kicking your ass until you're ready, we're a team." We'll be here," Sakura echoed. The offer of absolute, unconditional support pushed Sasuke over the edge he'd been teetering on. It was all too much in too short a time, and he let himself go. A voice in his head berated him for showing such weakness in front of outsiders, but Sasuke was able to quiet it. His clan was gone after all, but Naruto and Sakura were here, and warm, and even as he was quietly weeping, Naruto threw his arms around him and pulled until Sasuke's back was resting against him, and Sakura settled in his lap, wrapping her arms around both of them as she buried her head in Sasuke's shoulder and cried along with him. And he didn't feel weak, and he didn't feel ashamed. After a few hours, they all felt a bit more steady and settled. When Naruto's stomach growled, Sasuke chuckled and Sakura scolded him, and by mutual agreement, they all got up. Sakura gave Naruto the scroll he'd sealed their luncheon that morning, and he quickly had everything out and ready to eat. "So," Naruto said as they ate, and Sasuke tensed, wondering if he was going to tease him for his display, or if he were going to demand more information about Itachi. "You know how Kakashi-sensei made us promise I wouldn't teach you how to do Kage Bunshin?" Sasuke blinked in surprise. That hadn't been at all what he'd expected. "I don't think it's a good idea for us to learn it," Sakura said. "Kaka-sensei said it could kill us because we don't have that bloodline, Naruto." "I wasn't going to teach you," Naruto said. "I gave my word, and I don't intend to break it. But I have been working out a way where you can get the benefits of using Kage Bunshins without having to actually learn or perform the jutsu. Let me show you." Sasuke narrowed his eyes at Naruto's sly grin. Whenever he'd seen it on the blonde's face, something big had happened. Naruto reached into his pouch and pulled out 2 strips of paper with the crazy seal script that only Naruto was able to understand. I created a 2-part seal, Naruto explained. Which is why there are 2 Ofuda. Sasuke looked from one to the other, but didn't see much difference between them. From the way he saw her squinting her eyes at them, he guessed Sakura couldn't see a difference either. Basically, what happens is I do the jutsu, but when I mold the chakra, it's filtered through this seal. He held the one in his left hand up, which is placed on one of the target's chakra points. The seal then filters the chakra through the target's chakra system before sending it back to the second seal, which activates and executes the jutsu. That sounds really dangerous, Sakura said, biting her lip. Filtering it through another person's chakra system? Couldn't that fry the person's chakra? Have you done any test runs of it? Naruto deflated a bit. I wanted you guys to be the first to see it, Naruto said. So I've only done trials with some onigiri bunshin. But they might react differently because, not really alive, plus it's all still my chakra. I'll test it, Sasuke volunteered immediately. It was the least he could give back. But it could be dangerous, Sakura protested. He silenced her with a look. Are you sure? Naruto asked him. Sakura's right. If I screwed up, well, it could be bad. Did you screw up? Sasuke asked. I don't think so, Naruto hedged. Yes or no? Sasuke insisted. Naruto took a deep breath, then looked over the seals in his hands again. No, he said. No, I didn't. Then let's do this. Kakashi eyed his students warily as they pulled weeds from a pumpkin patch, their latest D-ranked mission. They had been acting oddly over the past few weeks during their missions. In morning training, they were fine, normal. In the afternoon, though, they were oddly more subdued and quiet. At first, he'd put it off as they're just being tired from the morning workouts. Then he'd attributed it to mutual dislike of the D-ranked missions. But Asuma had raised his suspicions when he'd mentioned running into his team training themselves the previous afternoon, when Kakashi had been watching them pick up trash from a local park. So he eyed them closely, looking for any sign they weren't who they said they were. Even then he couldn't find anything. Sasuke was still the mostly antisocial, emotionally stunted brat. Sakura still berated Naruto and made eyes at Sasuke, and Naruto still smiled and laughed like an idiot. Although, come to think of it, Kakashi realized Sakura hadn't been walloping Naruto like she used to. His eye widened as the implications of that struck him. Could they be cage bunshins? He wondered. He'd thought he'd made his point clear enough to all three about Naruto not teaching the other two that jutsu, but how else could they be in 2 places at once? No, he knew that if Sakura especially tried to make a shadow clone, she would be in the intensive care unit of Konoha General Hospital. But that didn't mean Naruto couldn't be making shadow clones that could then use henge to make themselves look like his teammates. He considered this as he watched his students move down the row of orange, and had the stray thought that there actually was a place in Konoha where Naruto's outfit could be considered camouflage. Sakura stood then and tripped over a vine, sending her wheeling into Sasuke, who tried unsuccessfully to steady them both. Instead, they wound up crashing to the ground and smashing a pumpkin. Sasuke groaned, rubbing his back and sloughing pumpkin innards off his shirt. Sorry, Sasuke-kun, Sakura apologized. Naruto shook his head and helped them both up, trying unsuccessfully to hide his amused smile. That rules out Sasuke and Sakura as clones, Kakashi thought. But Naruto could still be a clone. Naruto, after all, did provide the significant push in the team dynamic. So if he were a clone, and he didn't want to get whacked for stupidity, Kakashi thought it made a lot of sense for him to be quieter, which would lead to Sakura and Sasuke being quieter as well. He decided to test out his conclusion and winged a rock at Naruto. Then he blinked in surprise when Naruto whirled around to block it with a kunai, Sakura and Sasuke immediately sliding into defensive positions beside him. Oi, what the hell was that for? Naruto demanded, pointing an accusing finger at him. Ma, just wanted to see if you were on your toes, Kakashi said with a smile. Then he suddenly appeared in front of the blonde to deliver a sucker punch. Oof, Naruto doubled over, even as he was rolling back and throwing a brace of shuriken to give himself space to maneuver, Sasuke and Sakura following suit. What the fuck? Naruto yelled. That wasn't keeping me on my toes. Nope, Kakashi agreed with a grin, casually catching and returning the shuriken. That was me seeing if you're a caged bunchin. Naruto blinked, then gave him a queer look. Ever think of asking? No? Kakashi scratched his head. What an idiot, Sasuke muttered. Kakashi smiled. What was that? He asked. You want extra laps tomorrow? I guess I can let you do that. All three of his genin glared. Kakashi wasn't sure what to think about his genin. All in all, they really weren't too bad. They didn't whine at him overly much, and were pretty self-contained. They were smart enough to catch on to whatever he tried to teach quickly enough to keep from being annoying about it. They were also smart asses from time to time, but Kakashi considered that a plus, as it kept him entertained. But he felt like he was missing something. Something big. He was still considering it as he headed to the bar to meet up with some of the other Junin assigned to Konoha for the duration. Yo, he greeted, grabbing a chair at the table. My rival. I must say how unyouthful it is for you to leave your genin to train themselves for hours on end, Guy admonished. Ma, Kakashi waved away the complaint as he poured himself a drink. It's good for them. A few hours of teaching themselves and each other helps make them self-reliant. They know how to get things done without anyone spoon-feeding it to them. Self-reliant? Asuma chuckled. I'll say, I'd love my genin to have even a hint of their, self-reliance. And motivation. To stay and train for 5 or 6 hours a day by themselves. That's impressive for genin. Kakashi eyed him curiously, careful not to give anything away. Because he'd never left his team for 5 or 6 hours to train themselves. They like to surprise me from time to time. When was it you saw them? Today? Asuma said, and Kakashi hid his surprise at the response. You mean to tell me you do this regularly? Kakashi, you're supposed to be teaching these kids, Kurenai said. How are they supposed to learn if you leave them to themselves? Oh, believe me, Kurenai, Kakashi said smiling. My kids learn just fine. In fact, sometimes they're too smart for their own good. He got there early the next morning, earlier even than any of his genin. Because if this were happening as frequently as the other Junin seemed to think, then Kurenai and Guy were right and he was being too lax. Though he still resented their implications that he was nothing more than a burnout. He hadn't been there long before his genin got there, which surprised him as he was there an hour earlier than the meeting time he always set, and to which he was reliably 1.5 to 2 hours late. As he settled in to watch, his eyes went wide at what he saw. After a brief greeting, Naruto threw what must have been a few dozen kunai at Sasuke and Sakura, each of which turned into a Naruto, and then into a faceless, masked shinobi. Sasuke began sparring with the majority of them while Sakura took on a handful. Then Naruto jumped in, on the side of the faceless shinobi and the free-for-all really took off. Were they caged bunchin? Kakashi wondered, and was that Sharingan he saw flashing in Sasuke's eyes? Kakashi began to feel a bit ill. And as he continued to watch, he didn't feel any better. They were definitely solid clones, and no matter how Sasuke hit them, they didn't disappear. Kakashi's jaw went slack. Konoha Shinobi had been trying to figure out how to do that for years to no avail, and it seemed his students had managed to pull it off under his nose. He watched for almost 2 hours before they slowed, and he wondered why. Sasuke pulled a container from his bag and grinned as Naruto pounced on it. Onigiri. Naruto cried happily. Yes, I love it when it's your turn to bring seconds. They sat and ate, quietly resting and replenishing themselves as Kakashi realized they waited for him. He almost showed himself then, but Naruto fingered 2 seal strips and he held himself back. You guys ready? Naruto asked, and they nodded. Sakura turned her back to him and Sasuke stepped up to let her brace against him. Naruto unzipped her dress and, before Kakashi's eyes could bug out too far, stuck one of the seal strips on the small of her back, slicing his thumb and smearing it over both the seal strip on Sakura and the one still in his hand. Then he created a cage bunchin around the seal strip in his hand, and, instead of Naruto appearing, Sakura did. Before Kakashi had recovered, Naruto was zipping Sakura's dress back up and Sakura was shaking her head. That always feels so strange, she said. Then it was Sasuke's turn. He hiked his shirt up to give Naruto access, and Naruto placed a seal on him as well, creating a Sasuke cage bunchin. Then he threw a kunai, and a Naruto clone appeared. Kakashi was impressed. His kids had managed amazing feats in the few weeks they'd been genin. Kakashi was disappointed. He couldn't really say he'd been any part of their success. If anything, it appeared his team had been working around him instead of with him, and he'd been lax enough to allow it to happen. Kakashi was upset. His team had found a way to pawn him and the crappy D-ranked missions off on clones, and he hadn't noticed for what could have been weeks, for all he knew. He wondered if they were using the clones for his training sessions too. From what he'd seen of them that morning, the clones would be able to stand up to even harsh training without any problem. "Ready?" the Naruto clone asked. The Sasuke and Sakura clones nodded and headed out. Which at least answered one question. The brats stuck around for training. But Naruto wasn't the only one who knew Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, so Kakashi sent one of his own after the clones to see what they were up to. A few minutes later, Kakashi jumped down from the tree where he'd been watching. "Ohio, sensei," Naruto greeted. Sakura smiled cheerily and Sasuke, well, he didn't frown, which was about as positive a greeting as he gave. Kakashi did not share their good cheer. Training was brutal that morning. He let them break for lunch, but only because he wanted to watch them while they thought he was gone. The three genin practically collapsed into each other. "What did we do?" Sakura complained. "It was like he was angry with us. Really, really angry. But I can't figure out what we did wrong." "Ma, don't worry, Sakura-chan." Naruto tried to comfort her with a tired grin on his face. "He probably just didn't get laid last night or something. I've heard his favorite girl at the tea house he likes is sick or something." Kakashi's eyebrows went up to his hairline. "Baka, don't mention such things in front of a lady," Sakura chastised him. Naruto pouted and turned to Sasuke. "Nay, sorry, Sasuke-chan," Naruto said dramatically. "I didn't mean to offend your delicate, virgin ears." Both whacked him in the back of his head. "Don't be an idiot, you jackass," Sasuke said. But Kakashi noted the amused twitch to his lips as he said it. Kakashi wondered if he was in Bizarro land. They ravenously devoured the bentos Sasuke handed out, and then the clones came back. "Okay, you guys, ready?" Naruto asked. They nodded, and Naruto dispelled them, grabbing the kunai out of his clone before it hit the ground. Then he sat with a thump, and the three of them appeared to all pass out. Yes, Kakashi decided, this was definitely wacky world. Then his own shadow clone came back and dispelled, and he understood the desire for a nap as he sorted through the clone's memories of the morning. Apparently, his brats were trying to figure out jutsu scrolls in one of the nearby training grounds. Which explained why the other Junin thought him so lazy. Well, lazier than he really was, anyway. It was a good half an hour later before any of them stirred, and another few minutes before they could muster the energy to sit up. "Do you have the chakra to make clones before afternoon, or should we forego it this time?" Sakura was asking. Naruto yawned and cracked his neck. "Nah, I'm good. You guys alright for it?" When he received 2 nods, they went through the process again. Kakashi wondered where the seal strips from the first time went, as he saw both Sakura and Sasuke's backs were bare of the old seals. The 3 new clones popped into existence and promptly headed out. Kakashi wondered where they were going, if they were supposed to meet him to do the mission, and created a clone to follow them. When it dispelled a short while later, letting him know that the clones were back to practicing in their own training ground, Kakashi realized his kids hadn't ditched him, and the real ones were waiting for him right where they were supposed to be. Asuma and the others, he realized, must have seen clones working while the real ones had been with him, doing the crappy D-ranked mission. His anger at their deception evaporated at the knowledge they were innocent, only to be replaced by anger at himself for apparently neglecting the brats. He was sure Minato-sensei would never have let such a large thing slip by him. Looking at his kids, he promised he would do better by them. Kakashi dropped down from his tree and entered the clearing. "So we need to talk." His 3 students looked up at him. "No mission today, sensei?" Sakura asked. Kakashi ignored her. "The 3 of you have been busy little bees," Kakashi said, and watched the surprise cross all of their faces. Sakura bit her lip with worry, but the closed-off, guarded looks on the boy's face were what concerned Kakashi. Those looks said he was the enemy, and had to be guarded against or he would take something of value. He debated plunging ahead anyway, then shook his head. He'd promised to do better, and he owed it to his old sensei and his old teammates to do right by these kids. So, though the idea of people invading his personal space caused his gut to tense, he invited them back to his apartment. He'd thought the walk there was tense and painfully awkward. It didn't hold a candle to when they were all actually at his place. Which was when he realized he didn't actually have 4 chairs in his living room. In fact, he only had the dilapidated but really comfortable old couch which was situated facing the television. And he wanted this to not come across as him lecturing the 3 of them, so he thought having them together on the couch while he brought a chair in from the kitchen probably wouldn't create the best environment. He was, after all, trying to break the them versus him mentality they seemed to have going. So he dragged them all into the kitchen where he at least had a table they could sit around and enough chairs for them all to actually sit in. Would any of you like tea?" he asked, vaguely recalling faint memories from his youth of being admonished to offer guests something to drink. "Yes, please, sensei," Sakura said. Sasuke nodded and Naruto shrugged. Kakashi filled his kettle and set it on the stove, but then realized he would have to find 4 cups. He rummaged through his cupboards until he found a bunch of dusty cups which must have belonged to the previous tenants, as he couldn't for the life of him remember where else they might have come from. He quickly rinsed them out and set them on the table, then measured and dumped the tea into the pot and poured the water in to let it steep. When he'd poured for everyone, Kakashi realized he was out of inane things to do and that it was probably time to actually talk. "If you would like another Junin sensei," Kakashi began slowly, "I will understand and accept that. I can fill out the transfer request in the morning, if you like. I'm sure there are many other Junin who come more easily to teaching than I do." All 3 genin snapped their eyes directly to him. "Sensei?" Sakura asked in confusion. "I've been trying to understand why my genin would hide their development from me, and this is the only answer I can come up with," Kakashi said. "Otherwise, why wouldn't you share with me when Sasuke activated his Sharingan? Or that Naruto is a budding Fuinjutsu prodigy? Or that Sakura is delving into medical jutsu and genjutsu both with fervor?" They were silent. Sakura looked down and bit her lip as Sasuke glared into his cup and Naruto tilted his head back to stare at the ceiling. "Well?" he prompted. "Because you wouldn't care," Naruto finally said bluntly. "You leave us waiting for you for hours, so can you really blame us for coming up with something to do when you aren't around? And if you can't bother to show up, why would you care to hear about what we do when you aren't around? Have I neglected your training?" Kakashi asked. "If you compare what I've taught you over the past few weeks to what the other new genin have learned, have you been shortchanged?" "No, sensei," Sakura admitted. "Ino even said her sensei hasn't gone over half the things you've shown us yet." He noted Sasuke and Naruto both looked surprised at that and wondered if either of them ever spoke with the other new genin. Given their pasts, he guessed not. "So leaving you to your own devices for a few hours hasn't hurt your progress. And I have my reasons for letting you train yourselves. Increased teamwork and bonding, teaching you self-reliance, letting you work out what I've shown you and decompress a bit. None of which, I realize, seem very important at 12, but I assure you all of them are essential," Kakashi said. "And let me be very clear about this so there's no misunderstanding. I care very much." He had their rapt attention at that, Sasuke and Naruto particularly. Would any of you like to tell me anything about your accomplishments over the past few weeks?" Kakashi prompted, hoping one of them would begin to open up. The 3 of them all looked at each other, then nodded. Kakashi felt the tension he hadn't realized he was carrying in his shoulders relax. They had spent the rest of the afternoon talking, filling Kakashi in on what they'd managed to accomplish and listening to his advice and suggestions and plans for future training. It was oddly satisfying for all of them. He heard about Sasuke activating his Sharingan, and his attempts at evolving it to 3 Tomo. Sakura told him how she'd become interested in medical jutsu and what she was trying to learn. And Naruto was telling him all about the seals he'd created. He'd taken out a storage scroll and unsealed a large jutsu scroll where he'd made all of his notes and calculations on the Onigiri Kage Bunshin and the Anata Kage Bunshin, as Naruto had taken to calling them. "So basically, I just added another layer to the durability seals I created so that it's..." Kakashi let Naruto's voice wash over him. He'd thought himself proficient in the use of seals, but Naruto had lost him in the first few sentences of his technical explanations. And the diagrams and calculations Naruto was showing him, the kid was doing things with seals he'd never even heard of, much less seen. He made a note to find Jiraiya, who was one of the world's foremost seal masters, to get him to talk to the kid to make sure he wouldn't blow himself up. After that day, their training skyrocketed. With his guilt over allowing his attention to lapse, Kakashi began to truly devote himself to his team. To say the training was intense would be a bit of an understatement. Kakashi began working on Sasuke's Sharingan to help him develop all three Tomo, and to better understand and utilize what he already had. For Naruto, he taught him all he knew about seals, which he'd soaked up so quickly and easily he knew the boy was already close to outpacing him. And it was the same for Sakura with medical jutsu. But Kakashi had more to teach them than just those things. He was not one of Konoha's elite Junin for his looks, after all, no matter how far past his prime his colleagues thought he was. So Kakashi dedicated considerable time and effort to each skill he felt it necessary for a successful shinobi to have. He worked with all of them on stealth, infiltration, information gathering, taijutsu, strategy, tactics, stamina, chakra control, and a whole host of other things that other Junin sensei rarely touched on, much less demanded excellence in. He pushed them, hard, fast, and far, and they took to it like ducks to water. So when Kakashi requested a C-rank mission almost 3 months ahead of schedule, and the Hokage questioned whether his team was ready, Kakashi was able to answer, yes, with the utmost confidence that they were. Well, I have one I was going to give to a more experienced genin team, the Hokage mused, wondering at Kakashi's assurance. He'd never seen the man so confident and peaceful. We'll take it, the Junin said. My kids can handle it. The Hokage bit back a smile at that. His kids. Yes, it seemed Kakashi had finally managed to find some semblance of peace with his past. I have acquired for us a mission of great import, Kakashi announced when he joined them that afternoon. All three students watched him warily, and he pouted. His kids didn't trust him, it seemed. Then he smirked, remembering that they had good reason. We have a C-ranked mission, Kakashi said. Really? Nay, what is it, sensei? Do we get to do something cool? Something totally awesome? We'll be saving villages from torrents of raging floods, plucking them from the midst of disaster, and will no doubt be lauded by all as great heroes, Kakashi said. Really? All three had wide, gleaming eyes. Nope, Kakashi said, crushing them. We'll be building up levees. All three deflated. Still, it is a C rank. Meet me at the North Gate tomorrow at 5, ready for an extended mission absence. Do you remember what does and doesn't go in your packs? They all nodded. Good. Dismissed. No more training today. That's an order. All three pouted, though Kakashi knew the boys would protest calling it that, and Kakashi grinned as he disappeared in a whirl of leaves. When Kakashi showed up at the rusty canteen that night, he grabbed a chair with the usual crowd of Junin. Yo, Kakashi, Hayate slid a bottle of sake over to him. What's this I hear about you requesting a C rank for your brats? What? Kurenai asked, eyes wide. Asuma and Guy just stared. Already? Genma asked. Haven't you only had those brats for a few weeks? Meh, about 3 months, Kakashi shrugged. But I was told that we wouldn't be allowed a C rank until the first 6 months pass, to allow us time to really concentrate on getting our teams in shape, Kurenai said, concerned. What can I say? They're good kids. Kakashi slurped his sake down as the waitress cleared the table, blocking views of his face. Exceptional kids. Well, from the academy reports, I can see maybe Sasuke being ready, Asuma drawled. But that Haruno girl was nothing special, and Uzumaki was dead last. Not everything worth knowing is written in a report, Kakashi said cryptically. Besides, we're only helping to build levees for the annual floods. And let me guess, Genma rolled his eyes. You get one of the cushy port cities? Ma, nothing so luxurious, no, Kakashi said. Smaller place up north, Kamato. And the old man sending fresh genin up there? Asuma asked, whistling. I did that mission as a Chunin 1 year. Here's hoping none of you drown. The next morning, the genin of Team 7 were shocked to see that not only was Kakashi not late, he was in fact early. And he got right down to business when the three of them showed up, too. Alright, he said, first things first, what's in your packs? For 3 genin on their first mission out of Konoha, he expected the packs to be bulging. Instead, they looked barely full. When his kids emptied them to show only a couple of scrolls, though, Kakashi understood. There were definite benefits to having a budding Fuinjutsu prodigy on one's team. I'm going to assume you all have at least the standard supply lists? They all nodded. And in the event we have to leave without our packs, you're not carrying anything you care overly much about leaving behind, are you? They shook their heads no. Good. The client doesn't expect us for 5 days, but that doesn't mean we can slack. I expect us there in 3. We'll be using the tree walking technique to help us run through the forests until they're too thin to provide a cover. Do you remember my showing you how last week? He asked, and they nodded. Then let's head out, Kakashi said, using the Anbu hand signals as well as his voice to give the orders. He was slowly teaching them the unspoken language, knowing all 3 would be good enough for it later on if they were so inclined. More leaves come? Sasuke signed back clumsily, asking about the half-dozen Junin they'd all spotted. No, go. Kakashi replied, directing them ahead of him north-northwest, and let them leap off before turning to his audience. We'll be back in a few weeks, he said cheerily. Yamata ne, Hayate, Genma and Anko rolled their eyes. Asuma, Kurenai and Guy nodded, impressed by the professionalism, efficiency and competence Kakashi had managed to drill into his genin in such a short time. Kakashi ignored them all, having made his point, and turned to catch up with his kids. So, this is Kamato, hun? Naruto asked, looking at the rather dusty, desolate-looking town nestled into a shallow valley at Fire's northeast border. We're supposed to be saving this place from flooding? Sasuke asked skeptically. It looks like it hasn't rained here in about a year. Well, that's part of the problem, Kakashi said. When spring comes, all the snow in the mountains way up there melts. He gestured to the mountains in the distance as he spoke, but those same mountains throw a lot of the rain in other directions the rest of the year. So the ground stays very dry all year, except for when the spring floods come from spring melt. This little place is where all the mountain streams meet and the flooding begins. And the water spills into other springs that cause flooding all the way down Fire until it empties in the Gulf. It goes down to a trickle up here after about 2 or 3 weeks, and leaves this place in drought the rest of the year. About 10 to 12 teams get sent out every spring to reinforce the levee system from here to the Gulf to keep the water in the rivers and out of the towns. Why don't they just find a permanent solution to the problem instead of just patching everything up every year? Naruto asked curiously. Well, Kakashi considered. It is a couple million gallons of rushing floodwater. I imagine it's not the easiest thing in the world to deal with, nay? Naruto and the others all agreed that sounded like a really quite reasonable explanation, but that didn't stop Naruto from continuing to think about it. I ask for shinobi, and this is what Konoha gives me. Kids? Scrawny kids? The headman of the village was obviously disappointed and incredulous when he met Team 7 the next morning. I assure you, my students are fully capable of handling anything that might occur in this mission, Kakashi said. But in case an emergency comes up, I'm a Junin of Konoha, and will make sure the mission is a success. The headman still didn't look too pleased, but nodded his acceptance anyway, realizing there wasn't much of anything he could do about it regardless of his satisfaction with the team Konoha had assigned him. He turned on his heel, leading them to a large one-room structure just outside of the main village. Spring floods start in about 2 weeks, he said gruffly, clearly still not happy about the young genin he was assigned. What we need from you lot is to go make big sandbags. There's a barren field a few miles out we always use. The village women weave the bags all year long, so we have plenty of them for you to fill. Once you fill up a pallet's worth of bags, bring them back and we'll show you where and how to stack them. He threw the door open and motioned them through. How many bags do you need? Sakura asked, seeing the large room full of sacks stacked from one side of the room to the other and all of them reaching all the way up to the roof. All of them. Even Kakashi's eyes widened. Holy shit, Naruto said. The others only silently agreed. That night, after a few applications of Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, the headman and many of the villagers of Kamato had a lot more appreciation and respect for Konoha shinobi generally and Team 7 in particular. They were given a tiny room in the headman's house where they all bunked down together. Kakashi claimed the futon, citing seniority. The genin all rolled their eyes but didn't complain much as Naruto unsealed their sleeping bags. But even as his team went to sleep, Naruto's mind was too caught up in the problem of the annual floods to let him rest. No one had noticed when a handful of the Kage Bunshin he'd created to help with the sandbags had slipped away to inspect the levees and the riverbanks. Some of them had followed the almost dry riverbed all the way down to where it emptied into a much larger river. The path had obviously been man-made, and the river it fed was already high and raging. One clone followed the river downstream to where it emptied into the gulf, catching sight of at least a dozen villages along the way with sandbags being piled up along the levees. He wondered if any of these villages were the ones Kakashi mentioned as also having hired Konoha to help with building up the levees. Then the clone decided it had seen everything it could and dispelled itself. Naruto, lying in his sleeping bag and staring at the ceiling, quietly absorbed the knowledge that the water from the spring melt really wasn't of any use anywhere. And he thought about the dusty, parched landscape around him. Kamato could use the water, just not so much all at once. He wondered if there was anything he could do. The next morning, when they returned to the field to continue filling sandbags, Naruto thought the area looked rather like a bowl from all of their work. Then he blinked. His thoughts seemed to swirl together in his mind, and the tentative beginnings of an idea began to form. So when he created his army of cage bunshin, he directed them to continue digging out the bowl. And as his body worked to fill sandbag after sandbag, his mind worked out a way to fill the bowl. When they finally broke for lunch, Naruto quickly snatched a storage scroll from his pouch, and unsealed an even larger scroll on which he began frantically making notes. His team only shook their heads at him, well used to his antics by now. "We'll bring you back a bento, Naruto," Sakura offered. Naruto only grunted and continued his frenzied calculations. When his team came back, he was far too deep into his work to even notice. "Tch, leave him be," Sasuke said when Kakashi was about to physically drag him away from the scroll. "It's not as though we don't have enough Narutos already helping us." "Yeah, and who knows what he's coming up with," Sakura added. "Maybe it'll make all this go faster." Kakashi shrugged. If the rest of his team wasn't going to complain about Naruto slacking, he was inclined to let him continue creating. He'd yet to see Naruto come up with something that wasn't incredibly useful and innovative. Or, recalling the seal that had turned Sasuke's hair as pink as Sakura's for a few hours, at the very least entertaining. He turned back to the worksite and saw the 1,000 Naruto clones still digging and filling sandbags. And Sasuke was right, there really were enough Narutos to go around already. When Naruto finally came up for air, he looked around to see it was getting dark out, and that his team was just cleaning up for the day. "What's going on?" he asked. "Back with the land of the living?" Sakura asked teasingly. "Hun?" Naruto scratched his head. "Want to tell us what you were working on?" Kakashi interrupted. He ignored the glares from Sasuke and Sakura his question prompted. They'd long since stopped asking for fear Naruto would spew seal speak at them. "Oh, right. So, what I wanted to do was find a way to move the water from the flood to the bowl, because they look like they could use it. The water, that is, not the bowl. But I couldn't think of any transportation seals that I knew of, so I started on modifying a storage seal into a two-part seal, so that the first half would automatically store the water in it when water touches it, and then the second half automatically empties the water out. That way it can move the water from where it is to where I want it to be, but I had to figure out." When Kakashi felt even his eyes glazing over, he cut him off. Naruto?" he said. "Maybe a little less technical jargon?" Naruto huffed and crossed his arms over his chest. "Fine then," he pouted. "How's this for less technical? Water touch seal 1, water move to seal 2. No more flood. Lake for Kamato. The end." Kakashi blinked as all of the implications wound their way through his thoughts. "Can you demonstrate?" he asked. Naruto shrugged. "Sure." Kakashi watched in fascination as Naruto casually and seemingly carelessly scrawled the sealing script on 2 ofuda. The ink becoming infused with his chakra with every stroke of the brush. Then the brush disappeared as Naruto's fingers flicked through a long series of hand seals before slapping one hand on each ofuda. "Fuuin," Naruto said, then exhaled harshly. "Well, that's done. Anyone have a bowl handy?" Kakashi unsealed a dog dish from one of his own storage scrolls and handed it over. Naruto looked at him oddly, as though he was wondering why Kakashi carried around a dog dish but wasn't quite brave enough to ask. "For my dog summons," Kakashi offered. "When I give them treats during training." "You have dog summons?" Naruto asked, then shook his head. "No, wait, never mind. So, watch." One seal he put in the bottom of the dog dish, and the other he held in his hand, taking out his canteen and beginning to pour water over it. It vanished, only to reappear in the dish. "Cool," Sakura said as she watched. "And you think this could work for the meltwater?" Kakashi asked. Naruto nodded. "And that this field could be the bowl." His teammates eyed the field. That will be a lot of digging, Sasuke finally said. Kakashi had tasked Naruto with working out the final kinks of how the sealing system would work as he sent a message to the Hokage explaining the situation and requesting permission to renegotiate their mission. In the event that permission was denied, which Kakashi said was unlikely, or the village declined the offer, which Naruto thought even less likely, given how much they seemed to prize water, Kakashi also had Team 7 continue their sandbagging efforts. This had the dual purpose of continuing to hollow out the bowl shape for seal structure, should that go forward. The cry of a hawk drew all of their attention to the sky, pulling even Naruto out of his seal-induced trance. All Konoha shinobi were trained to respond to a hawk from their first days in the academy on. They were the Hokage's best non-shinobi messengers. Though Naruto had still been frustrated by the length of time the message took. As the hawk soared down to them, looking for a perch to land on, Kakashi threw up an arm. He refrained from wincing as the bird dug its talons into his arm and simply reinforced the skin with a bit of chakra to prevent punctures. Then he took the message out of the pouch and read it through, deciphering the code as he went as easily as if it weren't encoded at all. Well? Naruto asked impatiently, tapping his fingers against his leg from all of his nervous energy. The Hokage had given him permission to renegotiate. He had also made it abundantly clear that he wanted to have a long talk with Kakashi when Team 7 returned to Konoha. He winced at that. The language the Hokage had used had made it clear this was not to be a friendly chat. Home, he ordered the bird, launching it in the air. Kaka-sensei, can we do it or not? Sakura asked. Sasuke looked at him, head tilted to one side in question. Kakashi smiled at his team. Let's go talk to the headman, he said. Naruto refrained from groaning at Kakashi's bargaining tactics. As brilliant a shinobi as he was, negotiations were clearly not his strong point. So Naruto subtly shoved an elbow in his ribs, used the Anbu sign language to tell Kakashi target mine, which, though somewhat morbid as it was supposed to be used for assassinations, was the only sign he'd been taught so far that might apply, and took over. Ah, honorable headman, I can see you have some doubts, Naruto said, nodding wisely. But then, I remember you also had doubts that we were capable of accomplishing the mission you originally contracted Konoha for. That is true, the headman nodded. Remind him he was wrong about our claims once. Check, Naruto thought. Now to bring up the constant drought and cost of dealing with the floods each year. Still, I know you are a clever man, for you must be to have kept Kamato in such bounty, even with such drought. And prosperous as well, as you must be to hire a team of shinobi every year to deal with floods. So I can understand why a smart headman such as yourself might be skeptical of our claim. Check, and make him feel like I'm on his side, check again. It's not that I disbelieve you, you understand, the headman said, rubbing his chin in though. But it seems far too good to be true. And if Konoha could do such a thing, why would they wait so many years to offer up such a solution? Ah, but this is the first time that my team has been assigned such a task. It is the problem, you understand, that comes with administering a government, Naruto explained, trying to get the headman to sympathize. With so many people to be responsible for, things often get the simplest solution instead of the best. For example, the simplest solution in this case has been assigning a team to do exactly as you contracted for. Help build up levees for the yearly spring thaw. As a headman yourself, you must understand how such a thing might come to be when you have dozens upon dozens of requests and complaints a day. The headman nodded wisely, understanding and sympathizing with Naruto's point. Naruto refrained from grinning. This was much easier than the various sales pitches he'd made over the years in the Akasan. He already had the headman was eating out of the palm of his hand. Sakura and Sasuke, he noted from the corner of his eye, were giving him baffled looks, wondering where this version of him had come from. And Kakashi? Kakashi only looked bored as ever, though Naruto noticed he was watching him sharply. It was by both of our village's good fortune that this year, it happened to be my team assigned to your request, honorable headman, Naruto continued. My team is uniquely qualified to fill not only your original request for assistance in sandbagging the levees, but also in that we were able to see a possibility for a permanent solution to the dual issues of flooding and drought. Of course, should you decide it is in the best interests of your village to decline our offer, We will act with the honor of all Konoha shinobi and complete our original mission, please rest assured of that. But I hope you will at least allow us a brief demonstration of what we are offering, so that you might truly consider it. I would be honored to see what solution the honorable shinobi of the great Konohagakure no Sato might offer our humble village, the headman said as he bowed his head briefly in agreement. I am something of a practitioner of a rather esoteric shinobi discipline, Naruto said as he set out the 2 bowls they'd brought with them just for this purpose. It is a very ancient and subtle art, one which not many see the value in. Indeed, just looking at these 2 thin strips of paper would make any clever man wonder what purpose they might actually serve, he continued, holding the 2 ofuda up for the headman to look at. The script is peculiar and illegible, the paper want to tear at the lightest tug, if it doesn't first blow away in the gentlest of breezes. Bad plan. Kakashi signed to him, worried Naruto was going to blow it all now. Fail. Naruto ignored him, placing the 2 ofuda in separate bowls. The headman was watching in captivation, completely entranced by Naruto's performance. Just as Naruto planned. However, what might look delicate and frail and indecipherable can actually serve great purpose when in the hands of one who can make sense of them. Watch, he said, taking his canteen and pouring the water into one bowl. The headman gasped as he watched it appear in the second. What we propose, honorable headman, Naruto said as he continued to pour water into the bowl, is to move the flood water from the river to a reservoir, just as the water from this canteen is moved from bowl to bowl. Then Komodo will be safe from the flood, and have a supply of water that won't run out. Naruto, ever the performer, timed it so that just then, the last of the water dropped from the canteen and the first bowl went dry. He let the headman sit in silent contemplation for a few moments, letting the spell he'd woven sink in. Of course, it is in the hands of such clever men as the headman and the elders of this village to make such a decision about the possibility of such a change in the way of life for those of Komodo, Naruto said, pouring the water from the second bowl back into his canteen. One such as myself would never presume to be qualified to make such a decision. All I ask is that you consider it, honorable headman. Now please excuse us, we still have the sandbagging to finish. He reached into the bowls to peel out the seals when the headman stopped him. Wait, he said, I would like to confer with the village elders about your proposal. If it would please you, honored guests, I would humbly ask that you wait for our return. It shall be as you request, honored headman, Naruto said, bowing his head. He didn't bother holding back his grin as the headman hurried from the room. What was that? Kakashi asked, baffled by Naruto's actions. You were screwing it up, Naruto scoffed. Haven't you ever done any sort of negotiating before? My skills lend themselves more towards assassinations and black ops work than diplomacy, Kakashi said, more openly than anything he'd said in a long time. You don't seem to have that trouble. Yeah, where did that come from, Naruto? Sakura asked. It was like you were a merchant or a swindler, Sasuke offered. Yeah, a swindler or something. Naruto shrugged. Well, I've been both, Naruto said, much to all of his team's surprise. What? He asked their looks. I'm an orphan. I had to raise funds for the academy somehow. I've sold everything from snake oil to sugar to secrets and all that's in between. Doesn't the orphans fund provide for things like that? Kakashi asked. TCH, Naruto scoffed, looking away. If it makes you feel better to think so. Now quickly, before they come back. What are we supposed to charge for this? The Hokage advised that a large permanent seal structure like this is worth an A- rank to an AA rank mission, Kakashi said. Danger from enemy shinobi is of course low, but the danger from crafting the seal is high, and the number of people who can do it is low, so. Yeah, supply, demand, all that, I got it, Naruto said, waving him off. Now hush, they're almost back. The headman had come back with a handful of old men Kakashi assumed were the village elders. They'd asked for another demonstration and Naruto had graciously complied. As he watched Naruto negotiate with men 5 times his age or more, and get the better of them, Kakashi tried to figure the boy out. He was incredibly open, except when he was being cagey. He was brilliant, but had the worst academy grades he'd ever seen. He was sneaky and sly, except when he was being loud and bold and orange, of all things. And he was exceptionally self-sufficient, even for a child shinobi, except for when he was so vulnerably needy that even Kakashi had trouble turning him away. He was a host of contradictions. And with all of the strange things he knew and did and said, Kakashi was even more confused by him. Then Naruto named an outrageous figure, and Kakashi had to hold back from choking. And he watched with amazement as Naruto bargained harder and better than a fishmonger's wife until he got the deal he wanted and left Kamato's headman looking thrilled to have it. Then we're agreed, honorable headman, Naruto said as he bowed. We are, the headman agreed, bowing back. To be paid quarterly over the course of 5 years. For the first time since he'd gotten the message, Kakashi was glad he had a long meeting scheduled with the Hokage. Well, Naruto, Kakashi asked. What now? What do you mean, Kaka-sensei? Naruto asked. Oh, just that you've so far managed to invent a completely new seal structure that will change the lives of the entire village, get our mission upgraded to an A-ranked mission, and single-handedly renegotiate the terms of our mission, bargaining to get terms most favorable to Konoha. So, what's next, Taiko-chan? Kakashi asked with a grin. What? Naruto half asked, half yelled. But that's, you, ga. He glared at Sakura and Sasuke, who hadn't bothered to hide their snickering. And you two are supposed to be on my side, he pouted accusingly. Of course, Naruto Taiko, Sakura said innocently. Anything you say, Taiko, Sasuke agreed. You suck, Naruto said. Seriously though, you're the seal expert here, Kakashi said. What do you need us to do? Naruto looked up at him from under his eyelashes to see if he was really serious. It appeared he was. Well, Naruto hesitated, nervous now that they all were looking at him. What would really help? If you could somehow figure out how big the reservoir needs to be, and start digging it. Sure, Kakashi agreed easily. So as Naruto pulled out his giant scroll filled with inscrutably obscure notes, Kakashi sat down for some calculations of his own. As he wrote out all of the information he had on the spring thaw, he noted Sasuke idly sharpening and cleaning his kunai and shuriken and Sakura, hovering over his shoulder. Carry the 3, Kakashi-sensei, she said patiently. He looked down at his equation and realized she was right. A few seconds later, she spoke up again. You forgot an X, Kaka-sensei, she corrected him. Kakashi grit his teeth and added the X, where she'd pointed, after looking back over his work for a few moments and seeing she was right. Again, Kaka-sensei, you need to factor it too. Kakashi tossed the scroll at her and plopped down next to Sasuke. So, he said, you come up with a way to make me feel inadequate and completely superfluous today, too? Well, Sasuke said, never looking away from his kunai. I could show you my 2 Sharingan eyes if you really want. Then Sasuke was falling ass over teakettle into a stack of sandbags, and Kakashi was stretching out like a cat on top of the large pile, each a paradise in hand as he proceeded to ignore his entire team. Kaka-sensei, are you done pouting yet? Sakura called up. Kakashi arched an eyebrow, but continued reading without acknowledging her. He was not pouting. Come on, Kaka-sensei, we need help to make the reservoir, Sakura said. Don't bother, Sasuke told her. He's feeling old. Probably we should just leave him so he doesn't have to strain himself. And I bet we can get Naruto to modify some of the explosive seals to have bigger explosions. He was cut off as Kakashi appeared in front of them, casually sending Sasuke flying into the sandbag pile again. Kakashi had decided a while back that whenever Naruto and explosives were in the same sentence, it was time for him to intervene. Oh, are we ready? Kakashi asked innocently. Hearing problems and gray hair are signs of old age, you know, Sasuke replied, getting up and brushing himself off. It's silver, Kakashi protested. And it's been that way since I was a child, twerp. Now come on, this old man still has a thing or two to teach you. Naruto trailed along after them, nose still stuck into the giant scroll he had 2 clones carrying so his hands were free to make notes. Now mark off the area we need to excavate, Kakashi ordered Sakura. And I'll show you how ninjutsu can be applied in non-combat situations. Sasuke, you're going to help. Sasuke looked between him and Sakura. Can I help mark the area instead? He asked. No, Kakashi said as Naruto and Sakura snickered. After Sakura had finished, she sat back with Naruto as they watched Kakashi and Sasuke. Ready? Kakashi asked. Sasuke nodded. Then let's do this. Kakashi stood in the middle of where the giant reservoir was to be, and it was quite a bit larger than he'd imagined it would be, and began running through hand seals at a furious pace, his fingers flying so quickly it was hard for any of the genin to pick out any one seal. Underworld swamp, Kakashi called as he slammed a hand to the ground, sending his chakra out deep into the ground until the entire area Sakura had marked off was nothing more than a muddy mess. But he didn't stop there. Before the mud could swallow him down, he stabilized his feet with chakra and began the seals for another jutsu. Wind tunnel, he yelled, directing a tornado of wind around the mud, flinging it everywhere. When he let the jutsu dissipate, the reservoir had been completely carved out. He looked around and nodded, pleased with himself. Then he climbed out of it and looked to his 3 genin, completely covered in mud and glaring at him. "Oh, looks like you 3 could use a bath," he chuckled. All of their eyes twitched, and they didn't even need to look at each other before they leapt into action together, tackling him and drawing him down into the mud with them. And he laughed as he let them, wrestling them all down until there wasn't an inch of them that wasn't caked with mud. Ma, that's enough now," he said, hiding a grin as they all pouted. Really, they were all good kids. Great kids. "Sasuke, you're up," he said. Sasuke looked at him incredulously. "Oh, you want to get clean first?" Kakashi asked archly. "Well, alright." And he did a quick water jutsu that acted much like a fire hose, and drenched the kids, then himself. "All clean," he said. They glared at him, now dripping wet. Sasuke sniffed at him imperiously, then jumped down into the reservoir to help him cover the area with a fire jutsu to set the base of the reservoir into an unnaturally hardened substance resembling concrete. "That," Naruto said as he looked out over the reservoir, "is one big-ass bowl." "Wow," Sakura agreed, then looked up at him. "You're a lot cooler than I thought, sensei." Kakashi slapped a hand to his forehead and shook his head. "Brats, all of them." Naruto eyed the huge expanse of the reservoir that he was going to have to cover with seals and slowly blew out a breath. The thing was massive, and he hadn't taken into account that his normal way of doing a 2-part seal was to do both halves at the same time, which certainly wouldn't be possible when both areas were so large and so far apart. Then he took a running leap off the side of the reservoir and landed in the middle to begin painting the sealing script across the bottom of the basin. He worked through lunch and then through dinner, until his teammates dragged him away back to the headman's house to force-feed him and make him rest for a while. It wasn't a comfortable sleep. He hadn't realized how connected he remained to the seal through the active chakra until now. Which, he thought, was probably because he finished most seals within a few minutes. So he snuck back the next morning before the others woke to finish the preliminary script for the reservoir, then headed to the dry riverbed to do the second half. When Sakura found him, she was anything but pleased. "You didn't eat breakfast," she scolded him. He barely even looked at her, he was so caught up in the seal structure. It buzzed in his head, wanting to be complete. Demanding to be complete. "Baka, are you even listening to me?" she demanded, raising a fist in warning. Kakashi grabbed in and shook his head, then crouched down in front of Naruto. He looked at the boy's face, then took his chin in his hand to force him to look at him. The seal is already partway active, isn't it?" he murmured. "So we didn't do you any favors last night dragging you away. Well, here, eat this." He shoved a food pill into Naruto's mouth and he swallowed reflexively. "That should hold you for a few hours anyway. Do you need us to do anything?" But Naruto couldn't really hear him, he just wanted to go back to the seal. Kakashi sighed at Naruto's unresponsiveness. "Come on," he told his team. "Leave him be. He has to finish, or it'll just pull at his chakra until he's left an empty husk." "What?" Sakura and Sasuke screeched. We've got to let him finish, and watch him carefully to make sure he doesn't overextend his chakra," Kakashi said. "But we need to let him finish." So they spent the day observing him as he swept the riverbed with his brush and chakra. More and more of the villagers stopped what they were doing to watch along with them, fascinated by the strange ninja work. It was sunset before Naruto dropped the brush. He put his hands together in a familiar seal, and created 24 cage bunshin. Half of them immediately headed out. Kakashi eyed their direction and assumed they were going to the reservoir. "Kaka-sensei," Naruto said, voice rough. "When I tell you, can you and Sasuke toss me up? I need a direct line of sight to the reservoir." Kakashi and Sasuke nodded. Sakura fretted, biting her nails. Then the clones at the riverbed all got into place and Naruto was telling Kakashi he was ready. Sasuke and Naruto took a running start and Kakashi sent first Sasuke then Naruto high up. And when they began to lose speed, Sasuke and Naruto joined hands and Sasuke flung them in a circle to throw Naruto even higher. Then the world stopped. The amount of chakra was so oppressive even the villagers felt it. Thin lines of blue chakra shot down from where Naruto was barely visible anymore to the clones, who immediately started a long series of hand seals. Fuuin, they finally yelled, slamming their palms to the ground, and the intricate script Naruto had spent the last 2 days painting suddenly began to move and writhe. Sasuke dropped to the ground in a crouch, and he and Kakashi and Sakura watched the sealing process with as much fascination as the rest of the villagers. The script finally froze and settled into place, looking like nothing more than ripples in the bedrock. Then the clones disappeared and the lines of blue chakra feeding them went with them. Kakashi's eyes were already in the sky, calculating when Naruto would come back down and wondering what shape he would be in. When he spotted him in freefall, he knew the shape was not good. "Sasuke, send me up," Kakashi ordered. Back in Konoha, he would be able to do it himself, with the help of a nearby tree or tall building. But here, in the middle of nowhere with nothing taller than a house, he'd need help getting the lift. Sasuke nodded and cupped his hands, readying his chakra to boost Kakashi up in the air. Kakashi leapt and used his own chakra to help push off, and then he was near the boy and reached out with his chakra to draw him close. Landing was second nature, reinforcing his legs with chakra so he wouldn't break anything or roll awkwardly. He'd been doing it long enough he no longer even had to think about it. Then Sakura and Sasuke were racing over to check on Naruto. And, he noticed, so was the headman. "I didn't realize this would be so dangerous," the headman was saying to Kakashi. "Everything has a cost," Kakashi replied, concentrating on trying to get a food pill into Naruto. Many people think only of the wondrous things shinobi can accomplish so easily. What they don't understand is the hours and hours of training we must do every day to be able to perform such tasks. The vast majority of our lives we must dedicate to the ninja arts, and they always require us to make some sacrifice to use them. So now you see that while the amount we requested in exchange for creating your reservoir may have seemed very high to you, the fact is the cost to us is equally high, but in a different currency. "Is there anything I can do?" the headman asked, gesturing to Naruto. Sakura was stroking his throat to help the pill go down and Kakashi shook his head. "No, we'll return to our quarters to tend to Naruto. As soon as he's healed, we'll take our leave." Naruto didn't wake up for 2 days. When he did, he was so groggy and out of it, it was all Kakashi could do to force some food and water into him before he went back to bed. The following day, however, he woke with much greater cognizance and a ravenous hunger, much to the relief of his team. The 4th day, he insisted on getting out of bed, and threatened to go when their backs were turned if they didn't help him. That only made Kakashi tie him down and watch him like a hawk. Naruto decided not to antagonize him much after that. He'd never had someone look out for him like that before, and he found he kind of liked it. After much begging, on the 5th day Kakashi allowed Naruto to get up and walk around the village for a while. He inspected the seals in the riverbed and the reservoir and proclaimed them perfect. "Nay, Kaka-sensei," Naruto asked quietly, tugging on his vest to get his attention. "Why are they all looking at me funny?" Kakashi looked to the villagers, who were all looking at Naruto with a mix of admiration and respect on their faces. He shook his head that Naruto couldn't recognize it and began to explain it when they heard shouting. "The floods are coming," they heard being shouted throughout the village. "The floods are coming." Everyone was running towards the riverbed. "Come on, let's see the seals in action," Naruto said, breaking free of Kakashi and racing to follow the crowd. Kakashi cursed and followed, and Sasuke and Sakura shrugged and did the same. They all stopped in amazement at the sight. A wall of raging water was gushing down the riverbed in a massive torrent. Everyone held their breath to see if the seals would work. Then the first of it passed the seals and disappeared. The villagers started cheering. "Let's go see the bowl," Naruto said. "I want to see the water appearing there, too." Most of the village seemed to hear him and agree, as there was a stampede towards the basin. When they got there, the water had barely even spread enough to touch the sides of the basin they'd carved out, but the crowd was still cheering at it. "So, the Naruto Lagoon?" the Sandame asked archly. Kakashi had just returned to Konoha with his team and had been immediately summoned to the Hokage Tower for a debriefing. "The Great Naruto Lagoon," Kakashi corrected with a sigh. Ah, yes, of course, the Sandaime said with a grin. The Great Naruto Lagoon. Tell me, how do Sakura and Sasuke feel about that name? The brats thought it was hilarious, Kakashi snorted. They thought it was funny? The Hokage asked in surprise. Very, Kakashi said. It was originally going to be the Naruto Lake, then those two heard about it and started campaigning the villagers to make it the Great Naruto Lake. I'm not sure how it got turned from lake to lagoon, though. They thought it was funny? The Hokage repeated. All the psych profiles he'd seen on Uchiha Sasuke told him such a thing would make him enraged with jealousy and feelings of inadequacy. He wondered what Kakashi had managed to do in 3 months to change that reaction into a prank. Well, you see, it's Naruto, and he kept calling it a bowl, and a Naruto bowl is. Kakashi trailed off scratching his head. I guess you had to be there. Yes, I assume so, the Sandaime agreed. And did you find it equally amusing for your work to be named after one of your students? My work? Kakashi asked, confused. Sandaime said, steepling his fingers in front of him. You've been holding back on us, Kakashi. I had no idea you were such a seal master. Wait, what? Come now, the Hokage said reprovingly. To be able to come up with the idea, then design and implement such a seal structure is so short a time is nothing short of genius. I had known you were studying them, of course, but you never let on you were so far along in your mastery. You think it was me who came up with the seal structure? Kakashi asked. Well, yes, who else? Why do you think it's called the Great Naruto Lagoon? Naruto created the seal structure for Kamato? The Hokage asked, then shook his head. He's only been studying seals for a few months. He didn't even know what a seal was until I explained it the night he graduated from the academy. And you want me to believe he somehow was the architect behind this? You could ask any of my genin, Kakashi offered with a shrug. Ah, but they are your genin, the Hokage said. I have no doubt they would lie if you asked them to. Of course, Kakashi agreed. But to lie to the Hokage? I think you overestimate me. Besides, you could ask anyone in Kamato, and they would say the same. The Hokage turned in his chair to look out at the monument. His hands absently went about filling and lighting his favorite pipe as he contemplated what Kakashi had said. After a few minutes of silence, he began to speak again, not looking back at him. I think you underestimate yourself, Kakashi-kun, the Hokage said. I've seen you interact with your children, and I believe they'd do almost anything for you. Hokage-sama, Kakashi protested. This is not a criticism, the Hokage said as he turned to look Kakashi in the eye. On the contrary, I'm very pleased with how you have managed to develop your team into a cohesive unit. And you should be proud of yourself as well. Kakashi wasn't sure what to do or say, so he just sat in silence as the Hokage gave his pipe a few more quiet puffs. So, young Naruto really is a budding Fuinjutsu prodigy? He is, Kakashi affirmed. He's already beyond my knowledge, though I try to guide him when I can. I've sent out some feelers to try to find Jiraiya so he can at least talk to the boy and make sure he isn't going to blow himself up, but without being able to go after any of the leads my feelers turn up I haven't been able to find him. The Hokage gently tapped out the leaves from his now empty pipe. Here's what we will do. I will give Team 7 2 C-rank missions and 2 months to complete them. One will be to track down Jiraiya. The other is to track down Tsunade. I have messages to give them both. Both? Kakashi asked weakly, scratching the back of his head. Both, Sandaime agreed. And if you happen to convince Jiraiya to talk to Naruto while you deliver my message, well then, there's no harm in that. So we just have to track down some old geezers? Naruto asked when Kakashi explained their new mission. Tsunade and Jiraiya were students of the third, and are 2 of the legendary Sannin. They're more than just some old geezers, Kakashi said. Yeah, Tsunade-sama is a legendary medic nin, Sakura piped in, shaking her finger at Naruto. She's contributed more to the advancement of medicine than anyone else. Ever. Naruto gave a considering look. Does she have a nickname? He asked. Well, she's called the Slug Tamer, Kakashi offered. And, the legendary sucker. Sakura squawked. Sasuke looked at him in disbelief, and Naruto nodded thoughtfully. And she has, you know, Naruto put his hands about a foot in front of his chest. Big ones? Kakashi nodded vigorously. Biggest I've ever seen, he said. Sakura glared at them then HMPHED as she turned away. And Jiraiya, he's a whoremonger, isn't he? Naruto asked matter-of-factly. Yes, Kakashi blinked, a bit disconcerted that Naruto knew such unfavorable information about two of the jewels in Konoha's crown. In addition to being one of the world's foremost experts in Fuuin jutsu, he does enjoy the company of a certain type of women. Naruto raised an eyebrow at that. Kaka-sensei, when he goes into a brothel, they close it down for him. Call a spade, Naruto snorted. So where are we looking for them? The latest information the Hokage had showed Jiraiya to be somewhere in Lightning Country, so we can't go after him yet. But Tsunade was last spotted in Tea Country. It was 2 months ago, but it should give us a lead as to where to go next. Nay, Kaka-sensei, I might know a guy who knows a guy who Tsunade might be in debt to, and he might know more about where she is, Naruto said, careful to look out over the bridge instead of at any of his team. They, however, were all looking at him in interest. Oh really? Kakashi asked, intrigued. And how might you know him? You know, just, Naruto sighed and rubbed his head. He's just a guy a lot of people know. He's just, around, you know? So should I go talk to him? Sure. In fact, we'll all go, Kakashi said. No. Naruto whipped his head back around to look at Kakashi, which meant he missed it when Sasuke narrowed his eyes at him. That would be. It's not a place. He wouldn't talk to you. Why wouldn't he? Kakashi asked curiously. I'm a Junin. That's exactly why he wouldn't, Naruto said seriously. Kakashi frowned. Naruto, what kind of person is this? The kind of person who can lend a lot of money to Tsunade without having to worry about getting it back, and then be able to keep pretty good tabs on her, Naruto said, licking his lips nervously. The kind that doesn't like shinobi. And Kakashi understood. Yakuza. You're as much a shinobi as Kaka-sensei, Sakura said. Why would he talk to you and not the rest of us? Naruto gave a sardonic smile even as Sasuke frowned. Because I wasn't always as much a shinobi as Kakashi-sensei or the rest of you, he said. So even if I am a shinobi now, he'll talk to me. Alright, Kakashi agreed. You go talk to him today and report back tomorrow morning. You're all dismissed. We'll meet at the South Gate tomorrow morning at 6. I want to get an early start. Naruto was well aware that Kakashi was following him. He was sure that, if Kakashi had been really trying, Naruto would never have had a clue. Over the few months he'd had Kakashi as a sensei, he'd found out exactly why he was one of Konoha's elite Junin. But either Kakashi didn't much care whether Naruto caught on or he was underestimating Naruto's perceptiveness. Most likely it was a little bit of both, though Naruto had also had the benefit of knowing Kakashi would almost certainly be following him even before he'd caught him at it. Because over his time as Kakashi's genin, Naruto had also learned that his sensei didn't give in easily, and when he did, it was because he had something else planned. So instead of heading straight to the man he could ask his question, he instead meandered towards the center of town, near where the Hokage Tower was, then veered off on a side street that led to a busy market area. He ducked into a few different stores, knowing Kakashi wouldn't follow him inside where he was sure to be spotted. After he set up a pattern of going into a store, spending a while inside, then coming back out, he went into one that had a back door which led to an alley with an entrance to the underground. He slipped through without anyone taking a second glance, and knew he would have at least 15 minutes before Kakashi would think to look for him. Which was 13 minutes more than he really needed to disappear. The jumpsuit and his Hite 8 were quickly sealed away and exchanged for an old set of brown pants and his t-shirt. Then he slunk down through the false grate hidden behind a dumpster and was in the underground. It wasn't the sewer system, Naruto knew at least that, though he didn't know much more about the system of tunnels that spanned most of Konoha. But he thought it likely that it came close to overlapping either the sewers or an underground river since the place was always dripping. He was always careful to walk neither too close to the center of the tunnels where the water was deep enough in places to cover your ankles nor too close to the walls where he might run into one of the underground's residents. That was never fun. Out of self-defense, Naruto had to completely ignore the sounds coming from various dark corners, moans and groans and whimpers and pleas for help. He had to ignore it because if he looked, if he paid too much attention, he would see himself on every face and hear himself in every voice and would lose his old, best-forgotten memories. So he kept his eyes straight ahead as he made way through the tunnels of the underground, taking a few turns here and there until he found the exit he was looking for. He popped back up to the street behind one of Konoha's nicest brothels, which was across the street from Konoha's only casino. A few of the girls he knew from odd jobs he'd taken here and there when he was younger were in the back planting flowers and called out a hello to him and waved. He waved back, then ducked into an alley to change again, this time into nice dark gray pants and a black long-sleeved shirt. Running his fingers through his hair in an attempt to tame it, Naruto headed towards the building situated behind the casino. He knocked out a pattern on the back door that announced he was a friendly. The door opened and he was allowed inside. "Tell Jin that Naruto is here to see him," Naruto told the two big, hulking men who formed the welcoming committee. The one on the left nodded and headed back to deliver the message as the second Hulk stayed to keep an eye on him. He might have known the code, but that didn't mean he was trusted. It took only a few more minutes before he was ushered into the back. He hadn't been brought to Jin's office, he knew as he eyed the bare room with plain concrete floors and plastered walls. Another security measure, since he was an outsider now, that he wouldn't be allowed anywhere near something that actually had potentially damaging records. "Naruto," Jin greeted, motioning for him to sit at the other metal folding chair at the opposite end of the scarred wooden table, the only furniture in the entire room. Naruto thought the naked bulb hanging from the ceiling made the whole thing just a touch over the top. "It's been a long time. What business brings you back to my doorstep? You're not looking to run numbers for me again, are you?" Naruto shook his head. "I'm out of that business. I'm here about Senju Tsunade," Naruto told him. "I understand she owes you quite a bit of money?" Jin's eyes narrowed. "You always did know too much for your own good," Jin grumbled. "How much is she into you for again?" Naruto asked. Jin mentioned a figure and Naruto let out a whistle, tilting back in his chair. "Was she at least any good?" Naruto asked, alluding to the rumor that Jin had only lent her the money because she was sleeping with him. Jin snarled. I can't tell if that's a hell yes or a hell no, you know," Naruto mused. "What is any of this to you?" "Well, we may be able to help each other out," Naruto said, dropping the chair back onto all four of its legs and leaning forward. "You and I both know she's never going to make good on her debt to you. And you can't even, persuade her to pay, like you would anyone else who tried to welch." "How does you knowing this help me?" Jin asked. "Because I know that you keep sharp tabs on her, just like you would anyone else who was in debt to you so much," Naruto said. "And I happen to need to know where she is. You give me that information and I'll purchase her debt from you for, let's say, 10% of its face value." Jin raised an eyebrow and began to negotiate. Because the boy was right. Tsunade would never pay him back, and recouping even a portion of the money was better than nothing. Sakura valiantly tried to strangle the scream that was creeping up her throat and begging to be let out. Her parents, as much as they had supported her in the academy, were now finding her life as a ninja incomprehensible. Being civilians, Sakura had the intellectual understanding that they couldn't really relate or understand. Sakura found she didn't care. And irrational though it was, they were her parents, so she wanted them to be able to automatically understand everything. Automatically and immediately. "But you just got back," her mother was saying. "Surely it wouldn't matter if you took some time to come with us to Epona. How can they expect you to leave again with only a day's notice?" Sakura considered this briefly, wondering if they could be there and back in 2 days. Would Kakashi-sensei be able to delay their departure for a day? It would please her parents, and she had to admit that it was nice to be home in bed with her mother cooking for her after so many nights in a sleeping bag with field rations. "We haven't made the trip since you began the academy," her father said. "Because we wanted you to be able to follow your dream. But our business has suffered since we've had to outsource our buying trips. It would only be a month or 2. I'm certain there's nothing so pressing you can't go. It's not like we're at war, after all." "A month or 2? Sakura asked incredulously. "What could you possibly need to buy in Epona that would take that long?" "Don't be silly, we only need a week or 2 in Epona to make our purchases," her mother said. "But we have to get there and back, don't we? And it's a 2-week journey under good traveling conditions." 2 weeks? Sakura asked in disbelief. She could get there in a day. Sakura felt the gulf between her and her parents, between the life of a shinobi and the life of a civilian, very acutely just then. "Mama, Papa, I'm a kunoichi," she tried to explain. "I have duties and you have duties to your parents," her father said firmly. "And you will be coming with us." He stood up from the table and began to walk away, as though his declaration somehow put an end to it all. "I can't, don't you understand?" Sakura said plaintively. "I already have another mission and You can, and you will, her father ordered. End of discussion. Aren't you tired of playing at being a ninja yet? Her mother asked, voice tired and distraught. Playing? Sakura asked in a whisper, staggered at the realization of what her parents thought she was doing. We aren't getting any younger, Sakura-chan, her mother continued. It's long past time we started teaching you how to run the shop, so you and your husband can be prepared to take it over. Husband? Sakura's eyes went wide. Horatsu-san's son is only a few years older than you, her father said. They've made a few discreet inquiries. You don't mean Horatsu Barumo? Sakura asked in horror. He was 8 years older than her, and had teased her relentlessly when she was a child. She supposed he was relatively attractive, except for an overly large nose, but she'd never felt anything more for him than annoyance at best and fear at worst. Of course, her mother said curiously. Horatsu-san has a good import business. It would be a good match for our families. But not for me. Sakura yelled, the scream finally bubbling out of her. I'm a kunoichi, mama. I'm not going to be a housewife, and especially not to Horatsu Barumo. We haven't made any agreements yet, but the preliminary discussions have been fruitful, her father said. If you're completely opposed to Barumo-san, I suppose we can see what other families might have sons. You aren't listening, Sakura said. I'm not going to be a shopkeeper. And you have no right to enter into any marriage negotiations without my consent. Don't you understand that I'm a ninja of Konoha? You're my daughter, I have every right. I'm the Hokage's ninja first, Sakura insisted. She saw the hand. She'd been training in taijutsu for years now, so how couldn't she? But the idea that her father would strike her was so unfathomable that she didn't comprehend what was happening until he'd struck her cheek. She raised a hand to where he'd slapped her and looked to him with wide eyes. If you are the Hokage's ninja before you are my daughter, then leave my house, her father said, turning his back to her. Still in shock, Sakura was only half aware that the sound she heard was crying, and that it came from her mother. Let him provide for you. When you are finished playing at being a kunoichi and are ready to accept your real duties and your marriage to Barumo-san, you may return with an apology and a properly humble manner about you. But Papa, until you are my daughter, I am not your father. Leave us. Tears in her eyes, Sakura fled. When Kakashi arrived at their meeting place on the bridge, it was to find Sakura sobbing into Naruto's shoulder. Naruto had somehow managed to wedge himself onto the bridge's rail so that he could settle Sakura in his lap, but given the angle, Kakashi had to assume he was using chakra to hang on. Sasuke sat next to them, looking very awkward and self-conscious, but he had one arm around Naruto's waist and the other around Sakura's shoulders, offering what comfort he could. The boys noticed his presence, and he cocked his head to the side to ask what was wrong. They shook their heads that they didn't know. Kakashi sighed and hefted himself up on the railing on Naruto's other side. Nay, Sakura, he said, patting her back. What's made you so sad? The garbled wailing that came out was mostly lost into Naruto's shirt. Then she sniffled and turned her head so it was tucked under Naruto's chin and she could speak unimpeded. Mama and Papa, she stuttered, still trying to calm her tears. And Barumo. They want me married of all things. And taking 2 weeks to get to Apana. Apparently they must crawl the whole way. But I don't want to be a shopkeeper, I want to be a kunoichi. The three males all blinked in confusion, then looked to each other to see if any of the others understood what she'd meant. Your parents want you to get married on the way to Apana where you're going to be a shopkeeper in 2 weeks. Sasuke tried. I am a kunoichi, not a shopkeeper, Sakura insisted. I don't care what they say. If they didn't want me to be a ninja before a daughter, they should never have sent me to the academy. Then the whole story came spilling out. Kakashi didn't bother sighing when he heard what had happened. He'd expected it, though not quite so soon. Civilian families inevitably pushed their children into the academy, thinking only of the prestige of having a ninja in the family. But civilian families were not at all equipped to deal with the life of a ninja. It rarely ended well, and almost never when the child was an only child, as Sakura was. Sakura, Kakashi said, I don't have anything to say that could make you feel better. Really, I don't think there's anything that could. So instead, I'll give you a few truths to think on. You're a good kunoichi, and you'll be an even better one with time. You would be a great loss to the shinobi corps. But civilian families really can't handle shinobi lifestyles. So I want to warn you that a time may come that you have to make a choice between your family and being a kunoichi. But no matter what your choice, I will support you and help you however I can. Yeah, me too, Sakura-chan, Naruto piped up. Agreed, Sasuke said. Good, Kakashi said. Now wipe your face so you can see properly and we'll head out. We still have our mission. Sakura nodded sharply and took a spare bandana from her pouch. She didn't miss that he'd told her to do it so that her vision wasn't impaired instead of to make her look better, as her mother would have. And she found she preferred Kakashi's reason. Naruto, were you able to meet with your contact? Kakashi asked. He nodded. She's on her way from Coral to Saijin City, Naruto said. There's a poker tournament there she wants to play in. She'll be there in 2 days. Kakashi blinked. That's very specific information, Kakashi said. Naruto shrugged, knowing Jin had a very hefty investment in her. He thought of Tsunade's promissory notes sealed safely away in his pouch, and suddenly realized that it was now him who had a very hefty investment in her. Well then, Kakashi said when he decided Naruto wasn't going to offer up any additional information. Let's go. It was a 2-day journey for them to get to Saijin City. Saijin was a small city as far as that went, but one whose entire economy was based on vice. There were dozens of casinos, at least twice that number of brothels and more bars, it was rumored, than could be found in the rest of Fire Country combined. Kakashi only wished he were there on personal leave instead of a mission. Sighing, he turned to his kids. Do you know which casino is hosting the poker tournament? Kakashi asked Naruto. The same one that does every year. Naruto shrugged. The Hajimeto Hotel and Casino. We'll have to find out where that is. You don't know? Naruto asked, surprised. It's the best place in town. Geez, haven't you ever been here before? No, are you saying you have? Kakashi asked. Naruto just shrugged. Come on, I'll show you where the place is. Kakashi eyed the casino Naruto pointed out with dismay. It was one of the taller buildings he'd seen in Saijin, and even from the outside he could tell they went for opulence. They also went for security, as it was clear no expense was spared there with discrete monitors covering every point of ingress he could see, from windows to roof. Then there were the more mundane physical guards posted around the actual entrances. He wondered if they had hired shinobi to help them set it up or whether they had someone on staff who was just that talented. He'd have to check the mission logs when he got back, to make sure nobody in Fire Country was going to an outside hidden village to hire shinobi. Sasuke, Sakura, circle the building. I want you to analyze the security and report back with any possible weak spots we could exploit. They nodded and were off. Naruto watched him and waited. We aren't really going to try to break in, are we? Naruto asked, shifting his weight uncomfortably. No, but it's a good exercise, Kakashi said. Good, Naruto said with relief. Because these aren't the sort of people even a shinobi should piss off. At least, not without the Hokage behind him first. And you seem to know quite a bit about them, Kakashi replied. How is that again? Oh, you know, Naruto said with a shrug. Where I grew up, it's kind of hard not to pick up on that kind of thing. Naruto, you grew up in Konoha, Kakashi said. And you think that somehow means the entire village is perfectly safe and crime-free? Naruto asked incredulously. Get real, Kakashi-sensei. The village isn't perfect, and there are any number of places shinobi don't bother patrolling. The look in Naruto's eyes suddenly made the boy appear much older, and Kakashi wondered again what his life had been before being put on Team 7. Sasuke and Sakura came back then and told them what they'd found on the security. Basically, Sasuke summed it up. The only way anyone's getting into that casino right now is if they're one of the players. Naruto cocked his head to the side and thought. I could probably play, he said. I know a guy who could get me a seat in the tournament. Sasuke's eyes cut straight to him, silently questioning how. But the amount you have to pay to be a player in the tournament is exorbitant, Sakura said with a sigh. We found out the minimum was at least equivalent to an AA-ranked mission. And the expense account for this mission doesn't run nearly that high, Kakashi said. Naruto shrugged. There's a guy who's helping run it that owes me a favor, Naruto said. Kakashi shook his head, half in amusement, half in exasperation. That, Kakashi said, must be some favor, given the minimum buy-in. Yeah, Naruto said with a shrug. But then, he knows it's not like I'd ever lose at cards. Naruto had left his team to find accommodations and find out whether or not Tsunade had made it to Saijin City yet while he headed off on his own to call in that favor. He threaded his way through the back alleys like a native, heading towards a small tea house very few outsiders even knew existed. "Morning, Ni-chan," he said to the girl who answered the door. "Is Hariko Ne available?" "Of course, honorable sir," she said, bowing him into the establishment and leading him to a table. "One moment please." He sat at the low table, polished to a high glossy gleam. The place was small, and had only 4 tables, with orchids delicately placed into ikebana arrangements spread out through the room. As he waited, a small water feature caught his eye, holding his attention as the hollowed-out length of bamboo filled with water, tipped and emptied, then shot back upright, causing a soft cracking sound. Then it started filling all over again. When Hariko entered, she looked surprised to see him. The expression was quickly smoothed over as she joined him at the table and motioned for the tea to be brought. "Naruto-kun, is that you?" she asked. "I thought you were getting out of the business to be a shinobi?" "I did." Naruto shrugged. "Or I tried, anyway. Seems that life doesn't let you make clean cuts, though. I'm looking for Ichi. My husband's at the Hajimedo Hotel, getting everything ready for the tournament," she answered. "Is it anything I can handle without him? He's been rather besieged lately." "I'm calling in a mark he owes me," Naruto answered. "I need a seat in the tournament, and I need him to front me the stake." Hariko just stared. "I will, of course, pay back the stake Ryu for Ryu with my winnings," Naruto explained. "I see," Hariko said, recovering. "I believe this will be acceptable to my husband. Come to the Hajimedo Casino tomorrow and he shall have a seat held for you." Naruto nodded. "Thank you, Hariko Ne," Naruto said. "Also, could you pass along that I may have another piece of business to discuss with him at the end of the tournament? It should be profitable venture for him, getting rid of some bad loans." Kakashi had been skeptical that Naruto had actually gotten what he'd set out for. He had, of course, followed the boy, and all he'd seen was him being served tea at a tea house, then go around the town making some clothing purchases. But the next morning, he and Sasuke and Sakura had watched Naruto change into the rich-looking civilian clothes and confidently stride into the Hajimedo Casino, where he was greeted like an old friend and ushered quickly inside. "Do you ever get the feeling that Naruto hides more than he tells us?" Sasuke asked, eyes narrowed in thought and a frown forming on his face. Yes, Sakura and Kakashi immediately agreed with him. Then a dark-haired woman with a slight build exited the casino and caught Kakashi's eye. Shizune, he recognized. "Watch the entrance," he ordered his 2 remaining students. "I'll be back." Tsunade didn't know what to make of the strange luck she was having. She wasn't doing horribly, but she wasn't doing exceptionally well either. Instead, she was somewhere in the middle, progressing through the tournament by the skin of her teeth. This was distressing to her for a number of reasons, not the least of which was that she used her luck as a sort of barometer of things to come. The better luck she had, the more likely something bad was coming her way, and vice versa. So this odd middle ground made her unsure of what to expect. Then she sat down at the table with her next matchup, not bothering to even look up as she anteed and waited for her opponent to do the same. "Senju Tsunade, isn't it?" her opponent asked as the cards were dealt. "A pleasure to meet you." She looked up from the table to eye the twerp, and had to stop herself from sucking in a breath. The kid looked almost exactly like Minato had when he was still a little brat trailing around after Jiraiya. She shoved her chair back. "If you leave the table before we're through, you forfeit, you know," the kid said mildly. "Did Sarutobi send you?" she asked, eyes narrowed. But he only smiled and placed his bet. "Ma'am?" the dealer eventually had to prompt her. "Do you plan to forfeit?" "No," she said, looking at her cards and putting some chips up to start the betting. "So did the old man send you here after me?" Tsunade asked again. "Konoha must be very different now than it was when you were there, if you believe it can fund an expense account that could cover entry into this tournament," he said. "You are from Konoha, though," Tsunade said. He nodded. "Uzumaki Naruto," he introduced himself, sweeping the chips from the pot into his pile. She frowned, both at the name and the loss. "Uzumaki?" she asked, surprised. Tsunade had been sure he was Minato's kid. "I believe we have a mutual acquaintance," Naruto said, studying her intently as the dealer started off another hand. "I've recently made some acquisitions from him you may be interested in. Do you recall a man named Jin from your time in Konoha?" Tsunade froze and stared at the boy, wondering how in the world a kid so young could get mixed up with the Yakuza. "I may know such a man," she said noncommittally. "But I know many men. Why might any business between the two of you interest me?" The dealer motioned for her to either match the kid's bet or fold. She shoved the chips out on the table. "Ah, I suppose it might not," Naruto said, shrugging. "I simply thought you might be interested in knowing who held your debt." Tsunade dropped her cards. Naruto raised an eyebrow. "Lucky they fell face down," Naruto said. "Face up and you would have folded." "So you're not a ninja," Tsunade said, growling at him. "Just one of his." "Oh, no, I'm definitely a shinobi," Naruto corrected her, watching the dealer as he dealt the turn. "Then why?" "I have a teammate who's interested in medical ninjutsu," Naruto answered. "I'm not going back to Konoha," Tsunade warned. Then she cursed as Naruto won again. He left a few chips on the table as ante and she tossed a few out for her own. "Luckily you won't have to meet with her," Naruto said. "You're here with your team?" she asked. "Then Sarutobi did send you." "Of course," Naruto agreed. "I have a message he wanted delivered. But that doesn't mean I don't have other business with you. I'm not taking on another apprentice," she warned. "I'm not asking you to," Naruto said. "I'm asking you to meet with her." "Why should I?" she asked. "What's in it for me?" He gave her a look halfway between amusement and pity. Tsunade narrowed her eyes as the dealer laid out the turn and she folded, having absolutely nothing. "You don't seem to understand your situation here," Naruto said. "Oh? What situation is that?" "You've been very careful over the years to only borrow money from, shall we say, less than reputable sources," Naruto said. "Given your status and theirs, there was no recourse for them when you skipped out on them." She narrowed her eyes. "I am a shinobi of Konoha," Naruto continued. "So the rules you're used to playing by? They don't apply anymore. And if you're smart, you'll want to keep me happy. Which means indulging me by talking to my teammate about being a medical nin." Tsunade's mind raced ahead to 100 different possibilities and outcomes, then nodded. "I'll talk to the girl," she said. "But no way in hell am I coming back to Konoha. And I'm not taking whatever message you have from the old man." Well, we'll see, I suppose," Naruto said with a shrug as they were dealt another hand. "Why don't we make a little side wager? In addition to this." He gestured to the chips, not even looking at the cards he was dealt. "What kind of wager?" she asked, hiding the fact that she was very pleased with her cards. A pair of nines in the hole was a better start than she'd had so far. "I win, you take the message," Naruto said, laying it on the table along with a good number of chips. "You win, I don't try to give you the message again. And you cancel my debt," she said, matching his chips and raising them. He laughed. "Are you kidding me?" he said. "No way is one C-rank mission worth canceling your debt. Give me a little credit here." The dealer burned a card and dealt the flop, laying out the 3 community cards face up on the table. Tsunade refrained from smiling when she saw it had another 9, which meant at least 3 of a kind. And the brat still hadn't looked at his cards. She raised the betting. "Well," she mused, "what would it take for you to put that on the table?" "You'd have to offer something of equal value," he said, matching her chips and motioning the dealer to lay out the turn, an ace. "I'd consider anteing the debt I purchased from Jin in exchange for, say, you anteing you're coming back to Konoha and establishing and running a medical school. Full time." Tsunade's eyes widened. Then she looked from her cards to Naruto, who still hadn't even looked at his cards yet, and back again. She blew out a breath. There was no way she could lose. 3 of a kind and 2 more cards to be dealt? It was a sure thing. The dealer burned a card then set out the river. It was another ace. She smiled. "Full house." "Done," Tsunade said, pushing all of her chips over the green felt covering the table into the bet. "All in." "All in," Naruto agreed, pushing his own chips in. "Full house," Tsunade said, showing the cards in her hand. "Aces over 9s. She reached out to take the chips, but Naruto's hand stopped her. Then he turned over his cards, one by one. When she saw the first ace, she began to sweat. With the 2 on the table, that meant 3 of a kind. Which, she reminded herself, wasn't enough to beat a full house. Then he turned over his second card, and she stared in disbelief. Another ace. 4 of a kind, Uzumaki-san wins, the dealer declared, pushing the chips over to Naruto. He smiled and handed Tsunade the message tube from the third. "I'll expect you back in Konoha by the end of the week," he said. She began cursing, but Naruto just waited her out. "I'm not going back, you little twerp," she snarled. "I don't care what our wager was, I refuse." "Tsunade," Naruto said, face looking like it was carved out of stone. "I told you, I don't play by the rules you're used to, so stop acting like a spoiled child." Jin and the others you've dealt with may have had to take what you're willing to give, but I don't. Like a pathetic little genin, like you could do anything, she said. Ah, but as a genin, I have the right to bring my grievances to the Hokage, Naruto countered. He wouldn't do anything, Tsunade said. Not to me. Perhaps not for me, Naruto allowed. But if he were to ignore me, I would have cause to appeal to the Fire Lord. And if I were to then sell your debt to the Fire Lord. He trailed off, and Tsunade's eyes went wide as she stared at him. The Fire Lord had been trying to get her to come to his court for years to be his healer. And if he held her debt, he could make the Hokage send out his shinobi to force her to his court, where she would have to serve until her debt was paid off. You see how it would be better for everyone if you just do as you've agreed? You didn't even look at your cards, she protested. There's no way you should have won. Perhaps. But then, I only lose at cards when I want to, Naruto said with a shrug. Now, you'll be in Konoha by the end of the week? She scowled again but nodded and took the scroll, reading through it. The old man wanted her to go back to Konoha anyway, so at least it would kill two birds with one stone. And besides, the brat had never stipulated how long she needed to stay. A few weeks, maybe a month or two, tops, and she'd be out of there. Kakashi had all the faith in the world that Naruto would do exactly as he'd said he would, and find and deliver the scroll to Tsunade. But he hadn't survived so long as a shinobi without always having a plan B and a plan C and usually even a plan F. So when Kakashi saw the girl he remembered as Tsunade's apprentice, he followed her, being none too careful about not being seen. And when she finally spotted him and used a shunshin to appear behind him, Kakashi let her think she'd gotten the drop on him. What do you want? She demanded, touching a kunai to his neck. Ma, is that any way to greet a fellow Konoha nin? He asked cordially. What do you want? She asked again. He felt the kunai pressing closer to his throat. That isn't very nice, Shizune-san, he said with a pout. I'm not here to give you any trouble. But the kunai only pressed closer, and he decided he'd played the affable idiot long enough. Within the blink of an eye, Shizune was disarmed and pressed against him chest to chest, wrists behind her back and held tightly together in one of his hands as the other wrapped around her waist to keep her from moving. Her eyes widened as she tilted her head back to look up at him. What do you want? She asked again. Just to talk, Kakashi said easily. If I let you go, will you run? Or try to poke at me with sharp objects again? She tried to pull away, but Kakashi only tightened his grip and she winced. Shizune sighed and relented. Alright, good. Kakashi smiled and took a step back. How about we talk over tea? He pointed to a nearby tea house. She nodded and followed, restraining the urge to stick senbon in him as his back was turned. You're here from the Hokage? She asked after the tea was served. Ah, Kakashi agreed. My name is Hitaki Kakashi, she interrupted. I know who you are, Hitaki-san. Kakashi raised an eyebrow as he fiddled with his teacup. Are we being recalled? Shizune asked. Kakashi couldn't help but hear the faint hope in her voice. And the far more obvious concern. I believe so, Kakashi said. But I wasn't privy to the message before Hokage-sama sealed it. Shizune sighed. Even if it is, I doubt Tsunade-sama will agree to go back, she said. Not even at the order of the Hokage? Kakashi asked, surprised. Hokage-sama is very lenient with Tsunade-sama, Shizune said. He'd have worded it so as to give her the choice. But you want to go back, Kakashi surmised. Why don't you? You can come back with my team even if Tsunade-sama doesn't. I can't. Shizune shook her head. Tsunade-sama is not well, and I couldn't leave her alone. I'm sure you could convince her to go back, even if it was just for a short while. No, she wouldn't take my words to heart, Shizune said. I'm not nearly persuasive or important enough. Oh, I think you don't give yourself enough credit. If I'm any judge, you have more sway than you think. If I have any sway at all, it's only because I never ask her to do a thing she truly doesn't want to. Would you have had any luck in moving the fourth from a path he'd chosen? Kakashi frowned and finished his tea as a server blocked his face. Let's go find my kids, I'm sure they're wreaking havoc by now. Sakura and Sasuke had begun their watch carefully hidden, determined to keep from being found. After a while, though, they began to wonder at the point. And with neither Kakashi nor Naruto nor their target anywhere in sight, they were incredibly bored as well. Want to do the rest of the watch from that tea house? Sasuke finally asked, pointing to one directly across from the entrance they'd been assigned to watch. Oh, Kami-sama, yes. They spent the afternoon grazing on snacks at the tea house, until Tsunade stormed out of the casino. Sasuke and Sakura came instantly alert and watchful. This turned out to be not to their benefit, as it drew her attention and she spotted them immediately. She wasn't legendary for nothing, after all. She narrowed her eyes and began to head right to them. Oh, shit, Sasuke muttered. You too. She pointed right at them. You here with that blonde brat? You mean Naruto? Sakura asked. Sasuke kicked her under the table, and she glared back at him. I thought so. Tsunade flopped down next to Sasuke. Kid won all my money off me, so you two are buying me a drink. But, sake. Tsunade yelled the order to the waitress. Who was across the room? Sasuke and Sakura looked to each other, then shrugged. So, Tsunade said as she poured herself a saucer of sake. Which one of you brats is interested in medical jutsu? Naruto was sitting in the casino's high rollers bank room waiting for his chips to be cashed out when Ichi walked into the room and spotted him. Naruto, Ichi greeted him. Good to see you again. Ichi was Saijin City's equivalent to Konoha's Jin. That is, they dealt with all the money. My wife told me you had business to discuss? Ichi asked after the pleasantries were exchanged. Yeah, Naruto agreed. First off, these are yours. He pushed a relatively small stack of chips over the table towards him. To repay the steak you lent me. Ah, very good, Ichi nodded. You've always been good for it, Naruto. Unlike certain other players I've lent money to. He looked at the huge pile of chips Naruto still had and sighed. Naruto nodded. That leads to our second piece of business. I understand Senju Tsunade owes you quite a bit. Probably 3 or 4 times what she owed Jin, Ichi acknowledged. Ah, so you heard about that? Naruto asked, rubbing the back of his neck. Of course, Ichi nodded. It's a small community. I assume you want to buy it? I'll give you the same rate I gave Jin, Naruto nodded. And you can pass the word I'll give that rate to any of her debtors for as long as I'm buying her debt. So tell me, Tsunade said. What do you know about this Uzumaki brat? You could always ask me yourself, Naruto said as he swung into the seat next to Sakura. I already talked to your girl about medical jutsu, Tsunade told him defensively. And? Naruto raised an eyebrow. She may be acceptable, Tsunade dismissed. Well, you'll have a while to find out, I imagine. Naruto shrugged. What do you mean? Tsunade asked suspiciously. 10, 12 years at least. Don't you think? 12 years. Tsunade sputtered. Sasuke and Sakura just looked on in confusion. I don't think you could truly establish a medical education program in a day less, do you? She narrowed her eyes and sighed. No, I suppose not, she said through clenched teeth. Ah, so you're coming back to Konoha after all? Sakura asked hesitantly. Unfortunately, she grumbled under her breath. Which is great, because I had an interesting conversation with Ichi after you left, Tsunade, Naruto said, waving to the waitress for her to bring them something to eat. Ichi? Tsunade said, dreading what Naruto might say. He had something full of interest for me, Naruto replied. Tsunade slumped. The twerp had bought that debt, too. How much did you win that you could buy off Ichi? Tsunade asked. Naruto shrugged. Enough. Naruto dug into his dango. Sasuke and Sakura just continued to look confused until Kakashi found them. My, what amazing watchers you are, Kakashi said. Hey, we're here, our subject's here, and we're watching her, Sakura defended herself. What more do you want? Kakashi sighed. Shizune looked on in wide-eyed amazement. So, Tsunade slurred, well into her cups. You brats gonna escort me back to Konoha? If you request it, we can, Tsunade-sama, Kakashi answered, slouching his long frame back against the booth with his arms stretched across the back of it. But our mission isn't over yet. What do you mean? She demanded. Ya got me to come back to that damn village. What else could ya have to do? Unless, don't tell me. You're after that Jiraiya, too, aren't ya? She began to laugh as Kakashi nodded. Nay, you don't know where the old man is, do you Bon? Naruto asked. Tsunade, Naruto shortly found, packed an enormous punch even while drunk. Don't call me that, you twerp, she demanded. Naruto, what are you saying? Kakashi asked dramatically. You mean that you don't have some incredibly esoteric tracking device on him? You don't know a guy who knows a guy who knows his secret traveling companion? Naruto rolled his eyes. Ah, come on now, Taiko-chan, you're letting us down here, Kakashi teased. Naruto decided his sensei must have managed more sake than he'd thought. What will we ever do without your guidance, Taiko? Sakura asked, voice high as she batted her eyes at him. Naruto glared at them all and crossed his arms in front of his chest. Shizune watched the whole thing in amusement. Don't pout, Sasuke said, and Naruto hoped the teasing was over. You can't blame us for being surprised, Taiko. Naruto groaned and laid his head on the table. Wait, you need to know where Jiraiya is? Tsunade suddenly asked with a gleam in her eye. Well, lucky for you, I happen to know where he'll be in a few days. And if I had to go back to the village, he sure as hell's coming with me.
That's all for now. If you enjoyed this video, then please like, share and do comments.